bank froze my account the same day I found a thank you note taped to my apartment door from someone I'd never met. But let me back up a month to when this nightmare actually started. I was unemployed for 6 months, burning through my savings, when I spotted the perfect job listing on LinkedIn. TechFlow Solutions was hiring a remote web security specialist with above-market salary and immediate start. Within an hour of applying, their HR manager Jessica messaged me directly. The video interview went smoothly, except the interviewer kept his camera off, citing confidentiality protocols. I should have seen the red flag, but desperation makes you ignore warning signs. Jessica sounded normal in emails. The offer letter had all the right sections, and the onboarding portal worked cleanly. 2-factor texts, forms that saved, even a Slack invite with a company logo and 3 active channels. It felt like somebody finally looked past the gap on my resume and saw the work I'd actually done. I told myself some firms really do block cameras by policy. I Googled and found mixed answers, and they'd said security teams avoided showing workstations anyway. Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to understand I was counting rent by days and groceries by coupons. So yeah, I let myself believe. They moved fast. Background check link, a PDF gear list, a calendar invite for procurement orientation. On that call, a guy named Mark introduced himself as the verified vendor. "We handle outfitting for TechFlow contractors," he said, very confident. He knew my address, my resume bullets, even the exact laptop model I used to own from an old blog post I wrote. It impressed me and shut down doubts I should have held on to. He talked warranties, pre-installed security tools, drive imaging for 0-day sandboxing. When he said the company would front the cost via check, I finally exhaled because I couldn't float that kind of purchase. They offered me the position the next day with a trial period and advance payment for specialized equipment. The process seems standard for remote work. Company sends an $8,000 check, I cash it, and purchase equipment from their verified vendor. Part of the funds was for professional software licenses. The check arrived by courier the following day, looked official with watermarks and microprint. My bank accepted it without questions. Funds showed as available within an hour. The vendor, Mark, called me, explained the procurement process, and asked me to transfer money in parts through different payment systems for tax planning purposes. I hesitated. "Tax planning?" I asked. He laughed like we were on the same team. "It's just how the rebates work. Split payments let us itemize. It's standard. You'll get receipts." I pinged Jessica on Slack, "Is Mark your guy?" And she replied in under a minute. "Yep, all good. We do staged payments." That soothed me. I sent a small test first, 300, to a business name that matched the invoice. 15 minutes later, he emailed a receipt with a ticket number and a serial for a placeholder license. It felt procedural, which is exactly what I wanted because procedure meant policy, and policy meant safety. Mark kept a tight schedule. He said logistics were time-sensitive because of back orders, and 2 license keys had to be purchased via a crypto exchange to auto-assign seats. I'm not a crypto person, but he walked me through KYC screens and told me to screenshot confirmations for reimbursement. He kept saying, "Once your bank posts final, we square everything," and repeated that line enough that I took it as professionalism instead of a tell. He was patient when I double-checked routing numbers. I told myself real vendors don't mind cautious clients. It all slotted into the bucket of remote work weirdness I'd heard about. I sent 3 transactions, 2 for $1,500 each through a crypto exchange, and 1 for $5,000 through bank transfer to an unknown company. Everything felt legitimate until day 3 when the bank notified me about the fraudulent check and froze my account. Turns out all transfers were made with my own money while the fake check was still processing. I lost all my savings and owed the bank another $3,000 after reversals hit. I called Mark. Voicemail. I messaged Jessica. Not delivered. Police registered a report, but explained that cybercriminals usually operate from abroad, and fund recovery was unlikely. FBI took the case but warned about lengthy process. That same morning, I noticed the note on my door. White printer paper, blue painter's tape, neat block font. Thank you for your prompt cooperation. No signature. My hands went cold in a very practical way, like the bottom fell out of a spreadsheet. I peeled it off and scanned the stairwell. Quiet. Just my neighbor's metal cart by the elevator. I took pictures, slid the paper into a Ziploc like a TV extra, then realized I'd touched it a dozen times already. I locked the deadbolt and stared at my app's account-restricted banner until the screen dimmed. What did I think would happen here? I called the bank and waded through menus. A human finally said the check was returning unpaid counterfeit indicators. She sounded like I was part of it. I said I had an offer letter. She said counterfeit checks often come with paperwork. I asked how long the freeze would last. She read a script about investigations and provisional credits. Rent was due in 5 days. I refreshed the onboarding portal out of habit. Timed out. The Slack workspace vanished. I called the courier using the tracking number. Real company, real delivery. Sender paid cash at a walk-in. The pieces were all individually plausible and collectively rotten. The tech in me finally woke up, and I pulled headers from the offer email. Domain spoofed with an uppercase where the L should be. DMARC non-existent. The PDF signature block had a font mismatch I'd ignored. The careers page I'd bookmarked now redirected to a parked domain with ads for security audits. I took screenshots. At the precinct, a tired detective typed while I talked. Job, check, vendor, transfers, freeze, note. He asked if I'd given my social. I had, W9 in the portal. He nodded like he'd heard this all week, bagged the note, and said prints on inkjet were a long shot. Back home, I pulled credit reports, froze everything, reset every password that touched money. I emailed my landlord the police report number and a short explanation, because feelings don't keep lights on. I searched LinkedIn and realized there were 2 TechFlow pages using the same logo, one empty, one busy. The busy one had no posts in months and half the employees had generic headshots. I reported both and got auto responses. I sat there replaying the call where I'd laughed at tax planning, and I kept thinking about the thank you note like it was proof someone had been close enough to smell my dinner. An FBI agent called the next afternoon. Calm voice, straight questions. I gave him the same timeline and numbers. He said they'd seen the TechFlow name with variations. The vendor phone was VoIP rented by the week. The crypto went to mixers. I asked about the note on my door. Was that normal? He said it was a pressure tactic. Maybe someone in my building acting as a drop. Maybe just a scare to stop me from shutting anything down. I asked what I should do. He said, document everything, don't engage, and expect this to take time. Jessica and Mark stopped responding to messages, and by the afternoon their profiles were just gone. The Slack workspace erroring out like it never existed. The domain I'd been emailing turning into a parking page with random ads. I checked corporate registries, pulled Hoy's, looked up the GitHub org I'd forked from during onboarding, and it was wiped. That was when it clicked. It wasn't a one-off fake job. It was a machine, and I'd walked straight into the gears because it all looked like the jobs I used to have. A week later, just past midnight, I woke up to a quiet metallic chirp on my apartment door. Not a knock, that little ping you hear in lock-picking videos when the pin sets. I held my breath, watched the light under the door flicker from movement in the hall, then a slow scrape and pause like someone who knew what they were doing. I typed 911 and hovered, but when the deadbolt twitched, I hit call and whispered my address. I didn't open the door. I watched the peephole and counted 60, then 60 again, until the siren dopplered and 2 officers knocked hard enough to wake the floor. We walked the hall. Nothing. Just the exit sign buzz and the thin carpet. They took my statement and told me to get a camera and a longer strike plate. I crashed in a chair under the light. At 6 a.m., a white paper was under my door, same neat font as before. Thanks for cooperation. At the precinct, the detective skimmed the note and said they'd try handwriting, but printers made that a dead end. I mentioned our hallway cameras. He pulled up the portal and scrubbed the exact window I'd given. Black screen, frozen timestamp. He wrote, "Cameras in-op," like it was routine, and told me to talk to the super. The super shrugged and said the DVR rebooted and overwrote corrupt segments. He looked tired, and I couldn't tell if he was lying or just didn't care. It was obvious they had more than my resume. The lockpicks, the notes, the timing. Someone had mapped me. The detective said, "If you installed any of their tools, they might have dropped a loader. They could know your network better than you do." I went home, pulled power on the router, bagged my devices, labeled the boxes with a marker like it mattered. I drove to a big box store and paid cash for 2 SSDs and a cheap laptop because I wasn't trusting anything that had touched their downloads. That day I reinstalled from verified images on 2 machines, one silo for banking, one for everything else. New keys, new password manager, new emails. I turned on hardware 2FA where I could, printed recovery codes, stuck them in an envelope I sealed with tape. I reset my phone, switched carriers, added a SIM pin. I rotated every password that touched money or identity, bank, broker, IRS, health insurer, and set alerts for new credit pulls. It wasn't clean, but it was something I could do without waiting on anyone. On the fresh laptop, I checked the crypto exchange and saw blocked login attempts I didn't make, IPs all over. The agent later told me not to read too much into it, but it kept me on edge. I filed reports with LinkedIn and the job boards, attached screenshots and message headers and hashes. One trust and safety person replied that they were reviewing patterns. The TechFlow listing vanished the next day. 2 weeks later, it reappeared under TechFlow Global, same logo, slightly different domain. Money became basic arithmetic. The bank clawed back the provisional credit and added fees. I negotiated a payment plan because closing the account would trash my bill history. I sold my gaming rig and my second monitor and paid rent with a cashier's check. I took small bounty gigs and a night shift delivering groceries because it was verified quick. I learned which ATMs didn't eat cards and which gas stations had cameras that actually worked, details I never thought I'd care about. I told my landlord and asked to move to a different unit on the same floor, closer to the stairwell so I could hear foot traffic. He said yes if I covered the transfer fee. I couldn't. So I bought a better deadbolt, a door wedge alarm, a cheap stick-up camera aimed at the hall. By morning, the camera was in the trash room with the batteries gone. I told the detective. He wrote it down and said, "They want you unsettled. Don't give them access. Document everything." Phishing texts kept coming that used the fake onboarding language, device profile, license remap, remote verification, and the links were always one letter off their spoofed domains. I forwarded them to the agent, blocked the numbers, added the screenshots to a folder by the door with every bank letter and case number. The feeling that someone could touch my door whenever they wanted never left. The super said the new camera vendor was coming next week. He'd been saying that since spring. A year later, I'm still paying the bank, and I skip any remote offer unless I can video a real person and back channel through someone I trust. And the detective says the case is open but cold, and the agent says crews like this rotate names and tools and keep going because they only need a few hits a month. I don't know if the midnight visit was an actual attempt or just leverage to keep me compliant, but fear keeps me constantly checking locks and avoiding personal information online. The notification hit my phone at 3:17 a.m. Someone had logged into my work email while I was dead asleep in my bed. That's when I knew I was completely screwed, but I'm getting ahead of myself. It all started a month earlier when my coworkers were talking about Tor and the deep web during lunch break. As a systems admin, I knew about anonymous networks theoretically, but I'd never actually used them. My curiosity got the better of me, so I decided to do some research on my old laptop. I downloaded Tor and started browsing hidden forums, feeling weirdly paranoid about the whole thing. Most sites were just tech discussions and privacy advocates, nothing too crazy. Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to understand the setup was sloppy. I grabbed a beat-up ThinkPad from a drawer, the one I let my cousin borrow 2 summers ago for Minecraft mods, wiped it quick, installed Linux from a USB, and told myself it was good enough. I used my home Wi-Fi, same router my work phone knows, which in hindsight is exactly the kind of lazy crossover you promise yourself you won't do. First night on Tor, I set the security slider high, no script blocking everything, and I stuck to boring threads about exit node trust and DNS leaks. Second night I loosened up a little, clicked a few onion indexes, read a long post about metadata in PDFs. I kept telling myself I was observing patterns for work, attack surface, OPSEC, the usual, like I was doing homework and not just feeding curiosity. By the third night I was treating the thing like a late movie. I'd brew coffee at 11, open tabs, and read comments from people who typed like they slept under Faraday blankets. There were guides about compartmentalizing identities that all repeated the same lecture about never touching real-life accounts. Burner emails only, never reuse names, never mention your time zone. Stuff I know in my bones. I nodded along, smug even, then caught myself auto-filling a username with muscle memory and slammed the lid so hard the trackpad clicked. That jolt, the way your stomach drops when you realize your hands moved faster than your brain, should have been my stop sign. It wasn't. After a few nights of casual browsing, I found this forum with meetup invitations for privacy enthusiasts in real life. One post caught my eye. Someone was advertising a surveillance demonstration at an abandoned office complex outside town. It read like a tech talk crossed with an urban exploration flyer. Learn traffic analysis, low-cost RF tricks, bring your own SDR if you have one, limited spots. I knew it was probably sketchy, but my IT brain was curious about what kind of demo they meant. I wasn't planning to go. It was more like, what are they presenting? And, are they just LARPing with antennas? When I clicked the link, the page took forever to load, just showing a black screen with a spinning wheel. I sat there, watching the spinner, thinking Tor was choking or the site was a lemon. I toggled no script off for the domain. Idiot move, I know. Refreshed. Waited. Nothing. I checked the dev tools in the Onion browser. Yeah, I know. Leave me alone. And it was just a couple of opaque JS blobs. After 10 minutes of waiting, I gave up and closed the tab, thinking it was a dead link or some performance art for patience is a security virtue. I told myself I'd circle back the next night. Instead, I shut the laptop, powered the router off and on, force of habit, and went to bed, not knowing I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. The next morning, I got a LinkedIn notification about a new connection request from some random profile with no photo. The name was generic, like 2 first names mashed together, and the headline was, Security Researcher. The account was brand new, but somehow already connected to several of my coworkers, which seemed impossible overnight unless someone was seeding connections. I clicked through their experience, and it was just blank boxes, no companies, no dates, just buzzwords in the about, OPSEC, SIGINT, community. I blocked the profile and changed my passwords. Cycled the SSO tokens too, because that's what you do when something smells off. Around noon, I asked in our team chat, super casual, if anyone knew that profile. One guy said he got the request too, thought it was spam. Another said he'd accepted because they had 5 mutuals, which, yeah, that's how that snowball works. I pinged our security lead a heads up about a possible fishing farm on LinkedIn, then got buried in tickets for the afternoon. Printer fleet pushing bad drivers again. Someone locked out of their vault, the usual. That evening I received an email from a gibberish address at a domain that didn't exist. The subject line said, "Re-demonstration," and the message just had my home address with the words, "You missed the presentation." No signature, no link, no attachment. My blood went cold as I realized someone had connected my anonymous browsing to my real identity. I checked the headers, relayed through a couple of weird hosts but nothing I could trust, and the domain failed lookup. Burner or spoof. Either way, it did what it was supposed to do, get my attention. I went into incident mode without telling anyone. That reflex is hardwired. I yanked the ThinkPad offline, pulled the drive, booted it from a clean USB, and started carving logs for anything that looked like a pivot. Nothing obvious. Tor logs were normal, no weird circuits. The browser profile had those 2 JS files cached from the broken page, so I copied them to an external to tear apart later, then zeroed the disk because I wasn't going to pretend I trusted it. I power cycled the router again and reset the admin creds just in case I was being cute last time I set them. I wasn't, but still. I checked the MAC table on my switch for unknown clients, just my devices. I disabled UPnP, shut off remote admin, killed WPS, all the belt and suspenders flips. Then I moved to the work stuff because the LinkedIn angle bothered me more than the burner email. I reissued my device certificates, forced signouts on every session, rotated every password that mattered. Email, SSO, personal bank, throwaways. I turned on app-specific passwords where I didn't have them. I set push-based 2FA for everything I could and swapped backup codes on the rest. I dug through recent logins on every account like a raccoon in a kitchen trash can. IP ranges, user agents, timestamps. One of the logins in my work email was technically valid, company IP block, plausible agent, which is why the 3:17 a.m. notification hit later. But right then, I just saw clean history and felt stupid for feeling watched. I kept circling back to the email, my home address, and "You missed the presentation." I pulled my credit report and froze it, overkill maybe, but I didn't want new lines opening in my name. I checked my ISP portal for session logs, saw only my modem MAC on the account, no odd CPE. I checked my doorbell cam archive for drive-bys, 2 packages delivered, no slow-rolling cars. I unplugged the smart speaker in the kitchen. Silly, but it made me feel like I'd reduced one more microphone. Finally, I ran full system scans across everything that had touched my network in the last week. EDR on my work laptop, AV on the ThinkPad's cloned image, malware bytes on my desktop. Even scanned the NAS because paranoia doesn't cost CPU after hours. While the tools chewed, I sat there with a notepad writing down what I did and when, so if this turned into a report, I wouldn't be guessing. I checked the JS blobs in a sandbox, and they were obfuscated junk that didn't detonate, which didn't prove anything. Midnight came and went. The scans finished, and everything came back clean. I disconnected my laptop from the internet for 3 days, hoping whatever happened would blow over. I killed Wi-Fi at the router, yanked the WAN, pulled the SIM from my work phone, and moved the ThinkPad to a shelf like it was contaminated. I told myself this was a cooling off window, that whoever sent the message was trying to spook me into sloppy moves. On day 4, I brought it all back online, one piece at a time, router first, then the desktop, then the ThinkPad on a fresh user. I wasn't logged into anything yet when I noticed my desktop looked off. Icons were shifted like someone nudged them a few pixels. Nothing dramatic. But I group my stuff in a Tetris pattern, and I know where everything lives. System logs showed only my logins, clean as a whistle. That bugged me more than if there had been noise. Then I opened the browser and saw a new bookmark at the top bar, a plain file, link with a path into my user's documents. I didn't create that folder, and I definitely don't bookmark local files. I clicked it, and it opened a text file named capture.txt that I knew wasn't mine before the first line even finished loading. It was timestamps and URLs, not just Tor stuff either. Every site, every login time, even DHCP lease data for other devices on my home Wi-Fi, printer Macs, my TV, my roommate's tablet from when he stopped by last week. At the bottom, a single line. Next lesson will be hands-on. I felt my face get hot and forced myself to keep reading like it was a ticket queue. The logs reached back 2 weeks. Some entries were from hours when I was offline. I checked the file metadata, created during my 3-day blackout, modified right before I reconnected. I scanned for hidden streams, hashes, anything weird. Nothing. I tailed the system logs again and ran diff on my known good configs. Clean. I knew then this wasn't just a browser extension being cute. This was deeper, like firmware or something living between layers, and it wasn't trying to hide. It wanted me to see it. I went hardware first. I flashed the router with fresh firmware from a separate machine, verified signatures, factory reset twice, changed every credential, killed cloud management, shut off IPv6, and moved the admin panel to a non-standard port. I replaced the DNS with resolvers I control. I put the ThinkPad on an isolated VLAN behind a cheap travel router flashed with OpenWrt. I booted the laptop from a known clean USB, nuked the drive again, and checked the UEFI for signs of tampering. Settings looked normal, but that means nothing if you're not dumping chips. I don't have that lab gear, so I did the next best thing. I swapped the drive and Wi-Fi card with new ones. Then I used a tethered connection from a burner phone with a new SIM. Even on the burner network, the bookmark reappeared within minutes. Same path, same capture. ext, now updated with the new SIM's IMSI and the tether's MAC, and a couple of lines I recognized as ARP table entries from my travel router. I heard myself say out loud, "Okay, okay," and I closed the lid. I took a picture of the screen with a separate phone, then powered everything down and moved to the kitchen table like changing rooms would change the facts. I went full manual, wrote the timeline on paper, listed touch points, tried to find a path that didn't end with "everything you own is untrusted." I called a friend who does incident response. We spoke in short sentences because that's how these calls go. He said, "Air gap, image everything, call me from a landline," which made me laugh. Then he said, "I'm serious," and gave me a P.O. box to ship drives to. Before I boxed anything, I opened the capture.txt one last time, scrolling slow. At the very end, under next lesson will be hands-on, there was a new line I hadn't seen 5 minutes earlier, a calendar date for the following week and a time window. No location. Just be available. That was 8 months ago, and the surveillance hasn't stopped. I still find evidence of unauthorized access, files I didn't create, change settings, unexplained network traffic that security software can't identify. The hands-on never looked like a knock at the door. It looked like a camera permission toggled back on after I turned it off, like a smart plug cycling while I stood next to it, like a test message from an unknown number that included an exact battery percentage only my system tray shows. I cycled through hardware like a bad habit. New router, new modem, different ISP for a month, then back because the install tech wrote my account number on a sticky note and left it under the box. I put a hardware firewall in between and watched the logs fill with perfectly normal packets that felt wrong anyway. Every login notification makes me twitch. Every unfamiliar SSID near my house makes me wonder if they're still out there parked with a long antenna or just piggybacking on neighbors. I've consulted with cybersecurity experts, company retainer, an outside firm, 2 freelancers who showed up with Pelican cases, and no one can find the source of the intrusion or explain how they maintain access. They use words like persistence, supply chain, out of band, and then shrug because the evidence evaporates when the tools show up. I've rebuilt from scratch more times than I can count, imaged and re-imaged and treated every cable like a vector. The worst part is knowing that one curious click on a Tor link has destroyed my digital privacy forever. I can't prove who's watching me or what they want, and maybe that's the point, because they never ask for anything. They just keep adding to the pile, a new capture. Ext here, a silently re-enabled port there, a screenshot of my own desktop saved on my desktop like a mirror. Sometimes I try to pretend it's over. I put the phone face down and go make coffee, and then a new bookmark appears with a date in the future and a single line. You're still in the lesson. During the summer of 2021, our quiet Denver suburb became a target for hackers. At first, it just felt like pandemic leftovers. Too many people at home, weird delivery vans. But then a beat-up van with tinted windows started parking across from the Davis place at odd hours late at night, engine off, lights dead, always gone by sunrise. No one ever saw the driver. I watched from the front window pretending to scroll. And yeah, my wife said I was being paranoid, but the van never parked anywhere else. A week later, a patrol car began slow evening loops through our cul-de-sac, sometimes idling at the stop sign like it was listening. Teenagers don't buy cargo vans with a roof dish zip-tied on. I noticed that on night 3. Then the internet went strange. It worked, but speeds dropped so hard we couldn't load a basic page. I rebooted the modem, router, mesh. Fine for 5 minutes, then sludge again. Our provider said there were no outages and pushed a firmware update. Same story. Mrs. Cruz yelled across that hers was trash too. I could hear buffering from 3 houses. Mr. Davis told me their ISP had called to ask them to disconnect the router for maintenance. They did, and the next day 2 guys in polos with badges boxed up his modem and router and drove off in an unmarked SUV. They said we were victims, he told me. The van didn't show that night or the next, but the patrols kept coming. I decided to stop guessing and lock our stuff down. Factory reset the router, killed WPS, turned off remote admin, changed every password, router, ISP portal, SSIDs, even the printer. On the client list, 3 devices I didn't recognize kept blinking on and off like they were trying to cling to us. While I was still logged in, I glanced out and saw the same van idling across from the Davis place. A low rumble you could feel more than hear. I put on shoes and walked toward it with my phone up like I was filming. The brake lights pulsed and it rolled off, plate hidden under a grimy cover, taking the corners smooth like it knew our streets. My wife said, "Please don't make us the weird house," when I picked up the phone, but I called the non-emergency line anyway. The dispatcher said there were active investigations and to report lingering vehicles after dark. That evening, right after sunset, 3 quick knocks. I opened with the chain on. A kid, maybe 20, pale and jumpy, hoodie half-zipped, stared past me into our hallway and said, "You changed the passwords." "Why would you do that, man? You ruined everything." I asked who he was. He mumbled a first name and something about live streams and the mesh, like we were part of a project together. I told him to leave. He shook his head and said, "I was careful." Twice, like he was convincing himself. From the kitchen, my wife called, "Do I need to call someone?" And he snapped, "Don't," stepping in hard enough to test the chain. I shut the door and held the deadbolt while he talked through it. "You don't get it. This isn't over. Then his footsteps went down the walk. I texted Mr. Davis. Anyone knock there? No, he wrote back. I lay awake doing the dumb math of his phrasing, ruined everything, plus those ghost devices on our list. Morning. 2 cruisers idled at the end of our street, and a plain sedan sat mid-block with its doors open. On the curb, the same kid, hands visible. Plainclothes pulled a small desktop tower from the rear seat, then a Pelican case full of travel router-looking bricks, cables taped into looms. Gloves, photos, evidence bags. The steady rhythm that says they've done this before. The kid looked at me like he had a speech lined up, then dropped his eyes when an officer knelt to cuff him. Neighbors appeared in slippers, holding coffee, whispering. "Is that the porch knock kid?" someone asked. Another said he'd rung their doorbell at 3 a.m. I stayed by my trash can and watched them carry gear to the unmarked. The patrol car that had been looping our block rolled by slow, like a lap of closure. I checked a speed test. No buffering, just numbers flying again. By 10, the street was empty, like the whole thing had been a glitch. I didn't play hero. I work from home, I like my internet fast, and that van was sitting on my last nerve. I changed my passwords because that's what you do, and I walked at the van because I wanted a plate I could hand to the cops. If the kid had asked for help like a normal person, I probably would have told him to leave us out of whatever scheme he was running, and that would have been that. Instead, he came to my door accusing me like I broke his toy. I don't know what he was doing. Piggybacking neighbor routers, relays, stream ripping, something to do with that dish. But I get why the ISP scooped the Davis gear and why the cops kept circling. People think cybercrime means faraway servers and no faces, but in a suburb it still looks like a person at your door sweating through a hoodie. That was enough for me. Next day, police arrested him right on our street. The detective came by that afternoon, asked to sit at our table, listened while I walked him through the van and the knock, then said, "Here's the deal." The man they arrested was Tyler Cole, 22, from California, bouncing between short-term rentals and sleeping in that van when money ran thin. Not random. He specialized in breaking into home Wi-Fi. He'd park close, scan for weak routers, slip in, and ride traffic long enough to map a house. "Work from home made this easy," he said. "He's not after free internet," the detective added. Once Tyler got admin, or even a small foothold from a reused password or a pushed login, he crawled backups, shared folders, and phones that auto-joined. Financial files sold fast, bank PDFs, ID scans, taxes, photos of checks, and the ugly part was personal photos that synced unnoticed. He sold packs on invite-only forums with escrow wallets and burner accounts. He favored financial data and private photos because chargebacks are rare and victims stay quiet. The van was a rolling workstation, antennas in the rear windows, a dish on the roof under that grimy cover, a mini PC on a bolted rack, a travel router, an inverter to a second battery, and a cable run to the front so he could roll if anyone stared too long. "He sits outside and watches devices appear," the detective said. "Once he's in, he hides in plain sight." When I changed our passwords, turned off WPS and remote admin, and factory reset the router, that broke his link to our block and forced him to move on. I asked how long they'd been watching. "Weeks," he said. Another county logged the same van on a different block, same late hours, same slow-speed complaints. So our PD started patrol loops and worked with the ISPs. The Davis router call was coordinated so they could grab gear without warning him. "You walking at the van spooked him," the detective said. "His visit to your door tied him to a specific address. That helps more than you think. He asked me not to post about it, to keep routines boring, and to change my passwords again just to be safe." They towed the van the next week. An officer in gloves pulled a knot of cables from under the dash. Another bagged a beat-up tablet. A tech hauled a soaked laptop from the storm drain by the mailbox cluster at dawn. Later, the detective said it was Tyler's and mostly ruined. They called me twice for small clarifications and had me sign the statement. No one pushed me to do anything risky. They wanted clean times and device names. After that, the street went quiet. The patrol car stopped idling. Kids biked again like nothing happened. Within a month, Tyler was out on bail. Court dates slid. The address on file didn't match. His phone went dark. "We're still working him," the detective said. "But he's not the only one." And some compare notes. He warned that crews sometimes come back to rattle a witness or to test a neighborhood. He told me to put a camera on the street, turn on two-factor for everything, update firmware, and check router logs daily. If you see the van again, don't approach, just call. He also said to vary our routines. I wrote it on a sticky and stuck it to the modem. We did the boring work that night, and then we kept doing it. New router with WPA3, guest network off, device isolation on, unique passwords on paper, remote admin off. I showed my wife the ISP app and set alerts for new joins. We turned on two-factor for the banks and tax accounts. I aimed a camera at the curb to catch plates. For a while, nothing happened. Work and school. Still, at 2 or 3, I hear a car idle, and I sit up and watch the feed because I'm not going to sleep through it if someone comes back. The detective said the dark web is full of people like Tyler, and they can't track them all. And we hardened our setup. But our neighborhood no longer feels like a safe haven from the digital world. Back in 2010, when I was 16, my classmate Mike Stevens was the school's unofficial tech genius who could hack anything. He was skinny, red-headed, thick glasses, always tapping on a busted Dell like it was a piano, and he'd built a hidden share on the school network with old quizzes and teacher emails. Mike liked being the smartest in the room, so when an anonymous user on a forum called his stuff kitty level and sent him a link to show real hacking, he took the bait. He said the stranger told him to follow the link if he wanted to learn something big. He was amped to prove himself and told me to come over after school so I could see too. His house was quiet, and his room was basically the basement with dark curtains, a mattress on the floor, and a tiny desk with 3 mismatched monitors. A box fan shoved air at open computer towers, and a silver USB sat on the desk within reach. "Special browser," he said, loading it without looking at me and typing a long string from memory. A black page appeared with green text scrolling like it was thinking, and he said, "Watch the prompt." He started typing commands fast. Windows I didn't understand opened, and he said he was just enumerating, just a proof of concept. Then he plugged in the USB and leaned back like he was timing a magic trick, and directories began to appear. Some text looked like emails and a bank domain flashed by, and my mouth went dry even though I didn't fully get it. "Is this legal?" I asked, and he smirked and said, "It's not illegal to look." A progress bar showed up in a side pane, and I watched it fill like it was nothing and everything at once. He clicked, and nothing happened, and then he tapped keys harder, and the bar jerked backward and froze. A short line of text blinked at the bottom too fast to read, and vanished, and he said, "Nope." He ripped out the USB, yanked the power cord from the strip, and ran upstairs 2 steps at a time. I heard a door and plastic tapping and a router beep, and I stood listening to the fan wind down while the monitors died to black. He came back tight around the mouth, eyes not meeting mine, and said he had to reset a bunch of stuff. "Meet me at the school library tomorrow first thing," he said, already pushing me toward the stairs. I asked what that was we'd just seen, and he said it wasn't what he thought, and people on the forum weren't messing around. At the side door he said, "Tomorrow," and closed it. and the screwdriver he'd wedged in the latch clattered to the floor like he let it fall on purpose. I didn't sleep much because I kept replaying the freeze and the half-second error and wondering if we'd tripped something I didn't even know existed. Next morning at 7:25, I was in the library at the back row of public machines near the working power strip, waiting like an idiot. Mike walked in looking like he'd been up all night, pale and shaky with a hint of sweat on his forehead, even though it wasn't warm inside. He didn't say hi, just muttered "fresh machine," and sat at the farthest seat from the librarian's desk and woke the PC. He pulled the same silver USB, looked left and right once, and plugged it in, and the drive popped up immediately. He opened it, and the window filled with folders named with dates, short codes, city names, and initials that meant nothing to me. 12 gigs, he whispered like it was a diagnosis he didn't want to give. He clicked a PDF with a letterhead from a firm even I recognized from billboards, and it was a memo about a bid process with tracked edits still visible. Then a spreadsheet opened, rows of projects with columns called retainers, consulting, and disbursements, and totals sat next to names I knew from around town. "Where did this come from?" I asked, keeping my voice low because the librarian was stamping returns near the door. He said the link wasn't a tutorial. It was a drop, a dead box someone put where only certain people would find it. "This is bait," I said, and he shrugged without looking away and said, "Or it's insurance." Another PDF was a scanned check with a name that had been in the paper, not front page, but everyone knew it. An email chain talked about a foundation covering consulting, and it read like code for something I wasn't supposed to understand. He wasn't smiling now, just narrating under his breath like he was trying to make the files make sense to him. "This shouldn't be here. Why is this here?" he kept saying, and he opened a CSV of names and numbers. Some numbers matched the totals we'd just seen, and he sorted a column, and the top line jumped to a round figure that made my stomach drop. He tapped the screen with one finger and said, "See this?" And I nodded like I knew what I was seeing. He clicked into an email export and scrolled past subjects about permits and bids and considerations, like it was normal to see that. "What are you planning to do?" slipped out before I could stop it, and he shook his head barely and said, "Not here." He highlighted the parent folder, and the info pane read 12.4 GB and thousands of items, and he took a breath through his nose like he was bracing for a punch. He clicked one more file, an export of messages where people I'd only seen at ribbon cuttings talked about who owed favors and which foundation could root a gift. Mike said calmly, like he was naming a thing we could both see, "This is evidence." And then he kept scrolling, and he showed me about 12 gigabytes of files containing what he claimed was evidence of corruption involving local government officials and business owners. The files looked legitimate. The PDFs had letterheads I recognized from bank mailers and city notices. The spreadsheets had formulas and comments, and the emails had full headers with timestamps and routes. There were contract addendums, scanned checks, consulting invoices, and approval chains with tracked edits between people I'd seen on local news. None of it looked fake or pasted. It all lined up, names, accounts, dates. Mike scrolled like he was cataloging it and kept saying, "This is all consistent," and I believed it because every number matched another place 2 clicks away. He said the guy who sent the link expected him to do something with it. Dump it, pass it to press, whatever. And that's why the link was buried where only certain users would find it. He admitted his tower at home was probably cooked because the freeze wasn't a crash. It was a kill switch or a phone home, and he'd pulled the plug too late. "I'm not touching that machine again," he said, tapping the library keyboard like it might bite. Then he said a cable company van he'd never seen before was parked across from his house that morning. No ladder on top, no cones, just a driver sitting low and not reading a clipboard. "Could be nothing," he said, "or it's exactly what it looks like." After last bell, he didn't head to the buses. He said he was going to the public library to print, and then changed his mind mid-sentence. Too many cameras. He told me to meet him the next day in the corridor behind the gym where teachers rarely went. No phones, he said, powered his off, slid it into his sock. Next morning, second period, I cut through the gym and found him by the service exit. He wore his dad's oversized gray hoodie, hood up, hands buried. He didn't waste time. He held a sealed manila envelope with his full name in block letters across the front and said, "We need to move." He broke the seal with a locker key and slid the contents into his hoodie pocket as two freshmen drifted past. We stepped into the equipment alcove by the rolled mats. He pulled out a stack of glossy photos. The first was him leaving his house, the cracked front step plain, time-stamped from yesterday before sunrise. The next was him at the bus stop. Another was him walking past the cafeteria with a tray, shot from high up. There were shots of me too, blurred. Mixed in were pictures of his mom outside the clinic and his dad in a hard hat by a fence. "They know everything," he said, and handed me a single typed page folded in thirds. The letter said the sender of the data was dead, and Mike was next. If he shared the files with police or press, they'd make sure his parents paid. It used both parents' full names and listed their workplaces. It told him not to warn anyone, not to copy or print, and not to revisit the link. It said he had the package because they needed the data spread to the right audience at the right time, and if he moved wrong, they would shut it down and shut him down. Mike read lines under his breath, stuffed the page under his hoodie and said, "We're done. I'm out." He kept watching the exit bar. He told me he'd already deleted everything from the USB, quick formatted twice, then filled it with junk PDFs until it was full. He said he'd tossed it in the metal trash can by the east stairwell right after lunch because the janitor had just put in a new liner and it would be gone before last period. "It won't help," he said. "They already have whatever they want." We agreed to act normal and split. After that week, he vanished. No classes, no replies. Weeks later, I went to his house. His dad said Mike had been missing 2 weeks and police had put out an alert. It's been 13 years now, and I still don't know what happened to him. But I've never touched Tor or any anonymous network since then. Back in 2018, I was a college sophomore in Portland and often walked through the cultural district downtown with friends. We cut through there after late classes all the time, past the museum loading dock and those galleries with folding signs on the sidewalk. Nothing special, just noise and bus stops and food carts. One evening we turned into a narrow alley because it shaved a minute off, and we saw a group of students standing tight against a brick wall like they were reading a flyer nobody else could see. When they noticed us, they broke apart like birds and drifted to the mouth of the alley to pretend they were just waiting on a ride. As soon as we reached the street and kept walking, they folded back into the alley again. Nora said it was a drug thing and to mind our business. Malik said it was probably some dumb scavenger hunt. I said if it was nothing, we could prove it later, and both of them rolled their eyes. We waited an hour before looping back because that's the kind of stubborn I am. By then, the alley was empty. At the burrito place, Nora told me to drop it, said, "It's finals. They're probably filming some art thing." Malik said if it was drugs, they wouldn't be doing it with messenger bags on. I said, "Then let's go see after they leave. Because curiosity is a muscle I don't know how to rest." We sat an extra hour nursing sodas and scrolling. When we walked back, it was dusk, and the alley was quiet. No voices, just the buzz of a security light over a metal door and a line of trash bins. The wall where they'd stood had a brushed metal flap set into the brick at eye level. It clicked when I pressed the edge. Behind the flap was a lone USB-A port and a label maker strip that read, Free Wi-Fi access. Nora groaned. That is the sketchiest thing I've ever seen. Malik laughed and said it was a dead drop like those nerd blogs used to post about. It looked too clean to be random scrap. No tape, no loose wires, just tidy and deliberate. I said I would try it. Nora said, nope. Malik said, if you do it, use your own cable and don't tap anything. I told myself I'd plug in for 5 seconds and bounce, which was not a real plan but sounded safer out loud. I connected my phone. It vibrated, screen lit, then a burst of banners stacked and disappeared too fast to read. File received. Download complete. Imported. I yanked the cable and stared like I could will the icons to rearrange. No new apps. Storage didn't budge. Everything looked normal. We stood in that stale alley air, not saying much. Then we laughed it off. Me acting casual, Nora calling me an idiot, Malik saying it was probably some student pirate network to dodge campus paywalls. We left, and that was that. 2 days later, my phone started acting weird in ways you can hand wave for a minute, and then you can't. I'd open messages, and the camera would load instead. Maps opened by itself, closed, then opened again. The battery dropped 20% in an hour on airplane mode. I rebooted, cleared cache, deleted a handful of rarely used apps. It kept happening. I told myself it was a software update gone sideways. Then my laptop, which had never been anywhere near that alley, joined in. Chrome restored tabs I hadn't opened. A terminal window flashed and vanished like someone had brushed my shoulder and kept walking. I installed a trial antivirus, and it found nothing. Pop-ups for a driver update and a casino app started appearing anyway. I killed Wi-Fi and sat there looking at my own face in the dark screen, then powered down like that would help. The next morning, my phone's lock screen wallpaper was gone. In its place, flat white text on gray. Welcome to the Shadow Network. Not a notification. Part of the lock screen, like it lived underneath everything else. I showed Malik. He said, "Cool Erja," and told me to stop trolling. Nora told me to take it to the campus IT desk, and then immediately said, "Wait, don't tell them you plugged into a random wall." I was embarrassed enough that I tried to fix it myself first. Now, before I explain what I did next, you should know I wasn't totally clueless. I'd taken an intro cyber class to fill a credit, so I booted the laptop into safe mode, nuked browser profiles, reset the phone to factory, changed my main email and cloud passwords from Nora's phone, turned on every authentication option I could find. By dinner, the same stuff was back. The lock screen message reappeared. My laptop threw a command prompt at random. Codes for login started hitting my phone at 2 in the morning, and I stopped sleeping right. It got weirder in small, specific ways. A package arrived at my apartment with my name on it. A cheap USB hub in brushed metal that looked too much like that wall panel. 2 days later, it was a bundle of Ethernet cable. I hadn't ordered either. I took them straight to recycling. I didn't trust our router anymore, so I used a campus coffee shop network to check my banking. No obvious issues. And then stopped doing anything important online at all. The lock screen message kept showing up like a bell I couldn't unring. I finally told my parents because my dad's an accountant and keeps client files on his work laptop at home. He said, "Bring your stuff here. We'll look at it together." I drove out on a Sunday afternoon with my phone powered off and wrapped in foil because Nora said that was a thing. We set my laptop on the kitchen table. He plugged it in. At first, nothing. Then the cursor moved a ½ centimeter without either of us touching it. A command window blinked open and closed. He said, very calm, "Okay, disconnect from the network." He grabbed his work laptop to search Shadow Network and immediately got bumped to a login interstitial that looked like our ISP, but the URL was wrong by 1 letter. He closed it. His email signed out. His accounting software asked to re-authenticate and wouldn't. He said, "Okay, stop. Everything off. Wi-Fi off." He hit the router switch and stared at the lights like the box owed him an apology. I sat there feeling stupid and tried not to cry because that would waste time. Mom came in asking why the internet died, saw our faces, and said, "What did you do?" She wasn't wrong to be mad. She tried to check her bank app on cellular to make sure nothing was pending, and the app hung on a loading spinner before kicking back an error about features not available in her region, which made no sense. She tried again. Reload, face scan, wait, and then said her password wasn't working. She tapped "Forgot password," waited for a recovery email, and got nothing. She looked at me and said she was having online banking issues. The alarm went off a little after 2 in the morning, a piercing siren, and all the bedroom lights snapped on because they're tied to the system, and Dad was already halfway down the hall in his t-shirt yelling for us to stay put while the keypad screamed and the dog went wild at the front door like something was on the porch. He punched the code twice. It wouldn't accept. Then finally it chirped and went quiet. But the screen didn't return to normal. It showed a block of text I had never seen. System compromised. Data transmitted. "Nobody open any doors," he said. We checked windows. Nothing broken. No footsteps outside. Just that message and a dull ringing in our heads. In the morning I told them everything. About the alley, the metal panel, the USB, the messages. No excuses. Dad didn't yell. He pulled his folder of warranties and service numbers and called a cybersecurity service a client had used. He explained what we were seeing and what I'd done and asked for help today. They put us on hold. Then a tech came on, took serials for the router and laptops, told us not to power anything else, and to photograph every odd screen. The tech showed up before lunch in an unmarked van with a hard case and a tablet he wouldn't connect to our network. He asked for a clean table, gloves, and to see the alarm panel first. He photographed the message and said leaving it alone was right. He powered the router through a hardware firewall and watched traffic, ran a cable to my laptop through a write blocker, booted it from a USB, and began copying memory to a drive with his case number. He explained it plainly. Someone loaded an implant on my phone via that USB. My phone bridged into our home network, and from there it moved sideways to the laptops and the security hub. Our devices were acting as relays, bouncing encrypted packets, and the alarm wasn't a burglar. It was the panel seeing a push from outside and screaming because that's all it can do. He said people call it a shadow network. Dad asked if we were in legal trouble. The tech said intent and logs and timelines matter, and if we documented and reported, we were victims, not participants. He worked while he wrote, captured volatile memory, photographed cable layouts, then gave us a choice. Try cleanup, which he didn't recommend, or burn it down and rebuild. Start over, Dad said. It took hours. He wiped the laptops with bootable media he brought, reinstalled operating systems from known good images, swapped the router for a new one and flashed firmware, reset the alarm panel to factory-impaired sensors, turned off remote access we didn't need. He handed me 2 hardware security keys and sat with me while I replaced every password and enabled 2-factor not by SMS. Mom called the bank and the credit bureaus, placed alerts, changed her debit card, asked for a new account number. He had me set up new email aliases and move anything important off the old addresses. He also called a contact at the police cyber unit and told us to report the alley device. We drove downtown with him following and pointed out the wall. A patrol car idled while a tech photographed and pried the panel out with a flat tool. Inside was a tiny board epoxied to the brick, a thin cable into the wall, and a prepaid SIM. The officer said they'd take it to evidence and contact the building manager for access to the utility chase. A week later, a detective called. Dead end. The SIM was burned. The board was off the shelf. The wire disappeared into a utility run that served half the block. No prints, no clear camera angles, no purchase trail. The cybersecurity company sent a final report that said what we already knew. Access point to a hidden data transmission network, using infected consumer devices as relays. The tech said other cases were popping up. Free charging stations, fake maintenance panels, modified kiosk ports. And the scale looked big. Thousands, maybe. Spread across campuses and downtowns. We got lucky on money. No withdrawals, no new lines of credit, no weird tax return. The tech also said our boxes had been folded into a botnet, not the kind that slams websites, but a mesh for moving contraband data. He said traffic through us could have been anything: order lists, drop coordinates, payment confirmations, and that dealers and traffickers like laundering their comms through ordinary homes because nobody looks there. He said it sounds dramatic until you see how simple it is. I stopped using public chargers, stopped granting extra permissions, stopped clicking later on updates. Dad kept the report in his drawer next to the warranties like a warning with our name on it. Mom started calling the bank from the branch when she could, face to face. Now I understand how easy it is to become an unwitting relay for people who sell drugs, move weapons, and worse, and how none of them need you to say yes. I think about how fast it happened and how normal it looked, a tiny port in a wall with a cheap label, and how simple it was to become part of something you can't see and wouldn't choose. I'm not special. I was just a student who wanted Wi-Fi and a shortcut. Every time I see a cable or a sign that says free, I remember that alley. The alarm howling, the flat line on the screen saying what it said. And I wonder how many are hidden in regular places, and how many people are carrying them around without knowing. The Digital Plaza Marketplace operated for 4 years as one of the largest criminal enterprises in the hidden corners of the internet, serving over 2.3 million buyers worldwide before federal agents finally shut it down in 2022. It looked like a store, fast search, clean categories, and that was deliberate. They copied what worked from seized markets and ditched the parts that drew heat. Lower the friction, raise the trust, and people will buy if the checkout feels ordinary. It started with 4 Americans who ran it like a startup without a logo. David Chen handled the servers and code. Brothers Michael and Steven Rodriguez pushed vendor growth and risk. And Alexandra Novak ran payments, disputes, and policy. They launched right after a bigger site vanished, and traffic bled to them because access was simple. A pseudonym and a password through an anonymous browser, and you were in. From there came drugs, stolen data, forged documents, and malware. Protections looked professional. Escrow and multi-sig on high-ticket orders, a pinned no doxing, no threats rule, and long FAQs on coin hygiene that read like tutorials. Vendors bought placement with on-site tokens that cycled through tumblers. Buyers rated shipping times and potency like they'd rate a phone charger. The founders said they'd outlearned past mistakes. No plain text logs, no public email. And for a while that wasn't entirely wrong. Carlos Mendoza from Miami became moderator and marketer in one person. He answered tickets at 3 a.m., wrote seller spotlights for forums that pretended not to host ads, and kept the peace when buyers screamed about bunk pills or dead logins. He pushed promos with throwaway accounts and updated a Friday blacklist like clockwork. Inside, they kept spreadsheets and canned replies. Outside, it looked effortless, by design. By year 3, monthly volume hovered around $15 million worth of crypto. Thousands of vendors competed in a feed too fast to hand moderate. So the admins leaned on auto flags and a few trusted users to kill cons before refunds exploded. The mix barely changed. IDs that could pass a bar scan once, bank logins with instructions, benzos pressed to mimic pharmacy stock, and rent-a-bot malware, with the platform taking 2 to 5%. In 2020, the alphabet soup started watching full-time. FBI, DEA, and Homeland Security flagged Digital Plaza as a safety threat and opened a joint investigation. Undercover teams built identities the slow way, forum history, small talk, clean buys, and ran controlled purchases, documenting every message and transaction hash. Some agents sparked disputes to see who answered and how. "Don't escalate, we'll make it right," Mendoza wrote in a ticket on the first page of the charging docks. By 2021, the file held names, not just handles. Blockchain analysts did cluster work across coins the site pushed, mixing flow patterns with exchange KYC leaks and timing data until a set of wallets looked like payroll. Intercepts from an invite-only chat matched speech patterns and log times to the same 4 Americans who appeared on early vendor packets and private repo commits. The suspects were still arguing over maintenance windows and fees like it was any other quarter. The server map looked clever until it didn't. Front ends lived on short-lived VPS nodes behind layers of proxies, while databases sat on encrypted boxes in multiple states with watchdogs meant to wipe if anyone yanked a cord. Backups rotated and re-encrypted on schedule. Racks were paid through shells with PO boxes for offices, airtight on a whiteboard, until people had a bad day. The break came when David Chen's VPN dropped mid-login. He was clearing a backlog when his machine touched the admin panel naked for 2 seconds, long enough for a monitoring box to catch the real IP before the tunnel snapped back. That IP resolved to a condo leased by a mailbox company in a name agents had already tagged. They didn't kick doors. They watched. Packages in, food deliveries, a taped-over camera, and a habit. He logged in at the same hours whenever he was home. With Chen's slip nailed down, the picture tightened. A travel router leaked a MAC address seen at a conference check-in under Michael Rodriguez's badge. A DDoS payoff bounced through a mixer that, under legal process, yielded timing data lining up with Steven Rodriguez's wallet sweeps. A paste site the team used for internal notes got scraped, and in one dump were risk memos in Alexandra Novak's clipped style. The net wasn't one thread. It was 10 small ones braided together. Agents also pulled an older thread. Before Digital Plaza, the same crew, or all 5 founders, as one draft warrant phrased it, had run or staffed smaller markets that went dark under pressure. Whether Mendoza counted as a founder or an early hire depended on who you asked. Either way, the pattern mattered. Learning curves cut both ways. They avoided old mistakes and kept old tells. Recycled banned language, reused welcome text, and a comfort with vendors who followed them from site to site. Vendors were the last lever. Undercover agents bought from 2 of the largest accounts, Desert Fox and Night Rider, using identities that had earned trust over months. Orders shipped with tracking and signatures. Lab tests confirmed the forged documents could pass casual checks and the pills matched listings. Refunds on deliberately lost packages hit wallets analysts had tied to the commission rake. The buys were repeated and expanded to adjacent products, and each one layered another piece onto criminal cases against the entire network. Insiders warned the administrators months in advance. Nothing dramatic, just a detective's cousin mentioning a task force and a contractor flagging a subpoena, and the 4 founders kept operating while building an exit. They told each other pressure would cycle like before, that buys were clean, and that shutting early only handed users to rivals. By March 2022, the squeeze was obvious. Vendor bans sped up, mixers lagged, some shipments stalled, and inside chats turned to a calendar. The plan depended on trust in escrow. For 4 years, payments landed in site wallets and released when buyers confirmed or timers expired. Admins could force releases. The same controls could drain everything if pulled in sequence. "We do this once," Novak wrote, "and then we're done." They chose a 2-day window. Chen would batch sign. Michael and Steven would route proceeds through chains warmed months earlier. Novak would front messaging. They argued scale, enough to disappear but not so much it screamed theft, and settled near $18 million worth of Bitcoin based on balances and flow. Mendoza would keep tickets calm until the door closed. In the early hours of March 23rd, withdrawals began. To users, it looked like a backlog clearing. On the back end, escrow wallets sprayed coordinated outputs through mixers into fresh addresses under founder control. By mid-morning, the ticket queue exploded. Vendors couldn't withdraw. Buyers saw zeros. The status page flipped to maintenance. Mendoza posted a template about a migration and then stopped replying. Inside admin chat, the tone narrowed to logistics. "Cut the forum," Novak wrote. Michael said bridge nodes lagged and to pause for 30. Chen bumped fees on a stuck batch. No speeches, just a checklist. Services powered down in sequence. Federal teams were already watching. The drain supplied consciousness of guilt and linked escrow addresses to clusters tied to the suspect's prior activity. A winter wash trade had touched the same exchange account Novak used to buy a laptop. Chen's VPN failure months earlier made attribution clean. The theft turned probable cause into a green light. Warrants moved within hours. 7 states, sunrise entries, paired teams. Objectives were simple: seize running machines, image disks before wipes, detain without incident. Undercover agents who had built rapport with vendors pivoted to victim statements to secure fraud counts alongside narcotics and laundering. At Chen's condo, the peephole camera had died, and he expected a courier, so he opened the door. Agents moved him to the wall and crossed to a desk with a laptop showing a command window and a cold wallet app. 2 miles away, Michael and Steven stood over a bench with travel routers and Faraday bags. One reached to pull power on a NUC and got stopped mid-motion. Across town, Novak's apartment held a notebook with admin screenshots and payout addresses, and a hardware wallet taped under a drawer. Miami agents found Mendoza on his balcony drafting a post blaming state actors. He asked about a lawyer and then said nothing. His desktop had banner drafts and dispute macros. A key fob led to a storage unit with backup drives and a box of printed KYC reports for vendors who had reused details. Data center teams hit cages live. Some boxes tried to wipe. Capture kits froze RAM and pulled keys. Crews recovered multi-sig shards, SSH keys, and recent backups of escrow ledgers. Forensic accountants followed the exit flow and clipped parts at exchanges under legal process. By afternoon, a seizure notice replaced the landing page and mirrors. Charges stacked: conspiracy, computer fraud, money laundering, narcotics distribution facilitation, wire fraud. Arraignments came quickly. Evidence sat in neat piles: chat logs, wallet seeds, migration memos, timestamps. In late 2022, the sentences landed: Chen 25 years, Michael and Steven 22 each, Novak 19, Mendoza 12 for a smaller role in late cooperation. The platform died, but the demand didn't. Vendors posted losses, buyers counted zeros, replacements appeared with new names and the same promises: lower fees, better security, real escrow this time. Cybersecurity people said the cycle would keep turning because anonymity plus money plus speed keeps pulling operators back in, and law enforcement said they would keep building cases the slow way, with receipts and timestamps and small mistakes that repeat under pressure anyway. About a year ago, I was browsing hidden forums on the dark web, mostly out of curiosity about hacker culture and anonymous technologies. It wasn't some Ocean's 11 plan or anything, just me following threads about OPSEC and weird privacy tools cause I like to tinker, cheap ThinkPad, Tails on a USB, that kind of setup. And in one of those Onion chat rooms, a user named Cypher's Master pinged me. He pitched what he called a digital world survival game, said it was a skill test, light puzzles, nothing illegal, and I remember thinking, sure, why not? I'll poke at it for an hour after work. He dropped a link. I hit it through Tor. The page was bare, black background, one button that said, Start Test. I clicked. It refreshed to a single line. Await instructions. So I waited, watching the spinner in the Tor circuit window, listening to my fan, feeling stupid. 10 minutes. 15. Nothing. I typed some keys just to see if it would respond. Nothing. After about 30 minutes, I closed the tab, cleared the session, powered down. The game felt half-built, like a high-effort prank. I forgot about it by morning. 2 days later, there's an envelope in my mailbox, no return address, cheap white stock with that faint chemical smell like printed at a copy shop. Inside was a single sheet, a web address, Onion, and an access code. I wasn't going to touch it on my main box, but curiosity did its thing. Yeah, I know. So that night I booted Tails again, connected, typed the URL, punched in the code. The page loaded a grid of low-res video tiles, and at first I thought it was a demo, like sample feeds, until one of the clips expanded on its own. It was the entrance to a mall near my place, time-stamped yesterday 1743. The camera angle was bad, but the person walking in had my jacket and the same backpack strap fray on the left side. Me. Another tile popped. Produce aisle, different camera, me again, scanning apples. The video was cut clean, jump cuts following my path through the store, exit, parking lot, me pushing the cart with a bag of rice tilted in the top. Then a new feed, gas station canopy, the one off Maple, timestamp an hour later, my hatchback at pump 3, my hands on the nozzle. I didn't move for a while. Then the page flickered and text appeared over black. Level 1 completed. Ready for next? I closed the tab so fast I missed where my cursor was. I just sat there, listening to the laptop fan, feeling this heat in my face like I was under a lamp. Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to understand I'm not the type to do dumb movie stuff. I don't go running into alleys at midnight. I know the basics. Kill scripts, don't reuse passwords, watch links. But seeing that footage, mine it perfect of my last errands, made one thing obvious. Somebody was pulling public cams and private ones too, and cross-referencing images to build a route. That isn't magic. It's grind work with the right access or scraping kits and maybe leaked credentials. I kept telling myself this was just a flex, a scare tactic to make me keep playing, but the envelope in my actual mailbox, that detail, that got me moving. I immediately powered off, yanked the Tails USB, and put the laptop away. I walked the block, just once, to see if any weird cars were idling. Stupid maybe, but I needed air. And I tried to map if anything I did had exposed my address. I hadn't shared it in chats, hadn't bought anything, hadn't posted. The original chat with Cypher Master was onion to onion. The envelope meant physical eyes, or a data leak tied to my license plate at the gas station, or my loyalty card at the grocery store. I used the dumb number for discounts like everyone else. I made a mental list of everything that could connect those stops to me. Plate readers, POS metadata, Wi-Fi probes, and none of it felt good. Next morning, I deleted the Tor browser bundle from that USB and tossed the stick. I know Tails wipes memory on shutdown, but I wasn't going to keep a device associated with whatever this was. I checked my exterior cams, cheap battery ones facing the porch, driveway. No obvious creeps. I started varying my routes, took side streets, no set times, wore a different jacket, ball cap low. I stopped going to the mall, switched to cash for a few days, used my work VPN at home even off hours. It was all small stuff, but the point was to be unpredictable, or at least make whoever was doing this spend more time. A week later, my phone lit up with notifications from apps I didn't recognize. Names close to ones I knew but wrong, like Find My D, with a hyphen. Stuff that tries to sit on permissions. I hadn't installed anything. Google pushed one of those red bar warnings. New sign-in from Chrome on Windows Dallas TX. Then another. Security alert. Your location reporting has been turned on. I was at my kitchen table. I felt that prickly neck thing, and I grabbed the phone and killed Wi-Fi and data. Then I realized if someone was pushing through my Google account, going offline for a minute didn't undo anything. I sat down at my desktop, cleaner than the laptop, and logged into my Google security page. Session list showed 2 active devices I didn't recognize. Recovery email had a dot variant I've never used. Phone number unchanged. The weird part, my timeline had a detailed path of my last 3 days, the same side streets I thought would be noise. I revoked sessions, rotated the password with a local generator, 20 chars, mixed, killed all app passwords, reset recovery to an offline email, turned on hardware 2FA with a key I had in a drawer, then realized if they'd gotten me once they could try SIM swap or OAuth through something else. I called my carrier, added a port-out PIN, disabled remote changes. I grabbed my router, factory reset it, changed SSID, turned off WPS, refreshed the admin password. I know, should have done that sooner. I checked my PCs for anything new in startup, scheduled tasks, browser extensions. One extension was there that I didn't remember, a clipboard manager, gone now. I ran offline scans, nothing obvious. That means nothing. I printed a small list of the big accounts, crossed off ones I rarely used, started going through them one by one. Email, banking, cloud storage. No obvious transactions, but an OAuth grant to a generic calendar assistant from 3 days ago made my stomach twist. Revoked. I told exactly one person, a coworker who does incident response, without details, just asked what top 3 things he'd do if someone had live geolocation on him. He said, lock down mobile, fresh device if possible, lock down Google, Apple first, and assume physical compromise if mail showed up at your house. Assume cameras, he added. Assume they're patient. I spent that night with the breaker off in my home office, phone in a Faraday sleeve I use at work for demos. I know that sounds paranoid. I literally bought it as a gag, and I looked at my walls and thought about how many places you could put a pinhole lens that I'd never notice. I checked the smoke detector anyway. It was just a smoke detector. By morning, there were 3 new recovery attempts in my inbox from a Russian IP and one from a university on the other coast. A text came in from an unknown number. You're doing better. Ready for next? I powered the phone down and set it on the counter and just stood there. If you've never felt your routine turn into a map in someone else's hands, it's hard to explain how fast normal gets stripped away. I went down the list again, tighter this time, and I changed all passwords. A month went by where nothing obvious happened, just the same grind of rotating passwords and scanning accounts and trying to sleep with my phone in a drawer. And then I got a message from an unknown number on my messenger. No avatar, no history. Final level. Check your mailbox. That was it. I stood there a second because I didn't want to look like I'd sprint. Then I walked out front and opened the box. Inside was a small black flash drive in a zip bag and a folded note that said, "Contains all information about you from last month. Delete it and game ends. Keep it and data goes public." No threats, no timer, just that. I took it inside and stared at it a long time. Plugging unknown USB into anything is rule 1 of what not to do. So I pulled the old laptop I use for junk installs, disconnected it from the network, booted from a live Linux, and only then slotted the drive with a cheap data blocker. It mounted. The root had folders named with dates, each day of the last 4 weeks, and inside were videos and screenshots and PDFs. The first folder had a map image with a line traced from my house to my job, little red dots labeled with times. Another had camera stills of my driveway from the street. The angle told me it was shot from a car window, not my porch cams. There were screenshots of my email drafts I never sent, bank app screens with masked numbers but my name, a scrape of my contacts list, even a copy of a meme I texted to my sister. One PDF was a transcript of a private chat with my coworker. Not full lines, but enough. There were photos of my house taken up close, citing detail, the lock on the back door. I opened a text file and it listed risk items with bullet points, job title, manager's name, last 4 digits of 2 cards, the bank's fraud phone number, my ISP and plan, my car's VIN. That one hit hard because it's not online anywhere. Plus a list of behavioral notes. Leaves at variable times. Pays cash when anxious. Uses hardware key. It was like someone had been doing an audit on me. I said out loud, "What do you want?" Because it felt wrong to be quiet. The messenger pinged again. Delete, and it ends. I typed back, "How do I know you won't dump it anyway?" No answer. I didn't push. I backed out, unmounted cleanly, pulled the drive. I grabbed a hammer and broke the casing on my concrete step, snapped the board into pieces, then heated the chips with a lighter until they bubbled. I know that's not perfect destruction, but it's what I had. I did it fast, not because I believed the promise, but because the idea of that stick existing in my home felt like a live wire. I swept the shards into a bag and threw it out at a grocery bin a mile away, different direction than usual. On the way back, I passed 2 cars idling on the street and didn't look at drivers' faces because I realized there was nothing to see that would help. I thought about calling the police right then, but I'd already had a taste of how that goes. A week earlier, when the email alerts started multiplying, I'd filed an online report and an officer called me back the next day. He asked me to walk through the timeline. I explained the dark web chat, the videos, the messages. He asked if there were direct threats. I said, "It's a threat by implication." He said they could take a report, maybe refer to cybercrimes, but these cases were hard without financial loss or explicit extortion, and most perpetrators were overseas. He suggested freezing my credit and keeping logs. He wasn't rude. He was just normal. And this wasn't normal. So when I had the stick and the note in my hand, I already knew the official answer. Document. Preserve evidence. Don't engage. But the note said delete it and end the game, and I wanted it done. If I was wrong, it would go public whether I kept it or not. That night I opened a fresh notebook and wrote down everything I could remember. The times, the URLs, the exact phrasing, even what I'd eaten, because details matter when you're trying to build a pattern later. I changed my routines again. I pulled my credit reports and set freezes across the board. I replaced my router with a model that supports better logging. I set up alerts on my bank for any charge over a low threshold. I told my manager I might work remote more for security stuff, and he nodded because tech people say that sometimes and nobody wants to pry. I slept with my phone off. The messenger didn't ping again. The next day, nothing. Day after that, nothing. A week went by without a single alert on my Google account. No new sign-in attempts. No password reset emails. My cameras showed cars and dogs and nothing else. It was like someone closed a folder and moved on. I kept waiting for the public dump. It didn't come that week. It didn't come the next. Since then, I avoid hidden networks and anonymous forums altogether because I don't need to pretend I'm built for that world. But the patterns I picked up haven't left. Now I check my credit reports quarterly. I keep freezes on by default. I set up alerts on my name and my email handles. And any weird letter or call, unknown caller, energy company refund, a package I didn't order, flips me back to that message that called it a game, and the box that had a black USB and a note. And I didn't ever learn who Cipher Master really was, or why me. Random target, proof of concept, a bored person testing how far they could push without a ransom. Pick any. And the part that sits heavy isn't the data itself, so much as how easy it was to assemble from the scraps I leave behind. Because I live in a place with cameras and databases and APIs that talk to each other more than they talk to us. And even if that was the last move and the last level and it's actually over, I still catch myself looking at street corners and the edges of screens because in my head, I'm already marked as trackable. Which I guess is just another way of saying the game ended for them, but it didn't really end for me. So about 6 months ago, I got caught up in this YouTube trend where content creators order mystery packages from the dark web and film themselves unboxing them. I thought it would be easy views and subscriber growth, so I decided to try it myself, using an old tablet instead of my main computer for security. I had some leftover cryptocurrency from the previous year, about $800 worth, which seemed like enough for a decent mystery package. After downloading Tor and browsing various marketplace catalogs, I found this seller offering a unique surprise package for 0.08 Bitcoin. I disabled my tablet's camera and used a VPN, thinking I was being super careful about operational security. The seller seemed legit based on their ratings, so I went ahead and made the purchase through my crypto wallet. The weird feeling started right after I paid, like a low hum I couldn't place. The seller pinged me an encrypted chat within an hour asking for delivery logistics, and he wanted a fast response. Following what other YouTubers do, I gave him my P.O. box at the local postal facility and said no doorstep drops. He replied, "Works," with a winking emoji, then dumped a string of half-formed tracking numbers that didn't resolve anywhere. I told myself vendors do decoy numbers to throw off scrapers. It still felt sloppy, and I made a note in my outline to mention the sketchy comms for drama. 3 days later, he sent one line, "Ship confirmed," and then nothing. Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to understand my channel isn't a prank channel or any of that. It's budget gear reviews, editing tips, little tutorials on how to light a face with 2 lamps and some diffusion. Very normal, pretty boring. The dark web unboxing videos were running hot, which meant one solid upload could pay 2 months of rent if it hit. So I storyboarded an intro, scribbled a legal disclaimer slide I'd seen elsewhere. Does that even matter? Who knows? And set a reminder to blur anything that could dox somebody. Also, because I'm not stupid, I didn't touch my main network. The tablet stayed on a guest hotspot, camera taped, mic off except when shooting. I felt cautious enough to joke about it on camera without being actually dumb. The package showed up 28 days later. Plain brown wrapping, multiple layers of packing tape mummified around every seam, barcodes scratched off until the cardboard fuzzed. The postal clerk slid it over with eyebrows up. I brought it home and staged the scene. Tripod, key light at 45, a background sheet clamped to a stand, lav mic under my collar. I did a test clap, rolled a white balance card, and hit record. "What's up, guys?" I said, gave the spiel about mystery packages, promised to cut if anything illegal popped up. I wasn't going to upload contraband, period, and set the box down in frame. The cutting took forever. The tape gum clogged my blade twice, so I swapped knives and kept commentary going because dead air kills retention. Inside the big box was a smaller one, also taped to death, and inside that, a freezer bag with a leather notebook wrapped in butcher paper. That was it. No phone, no drive, no dramatic prop for a thumbnail. The notebook looked old, not antique old, just used hard old, scuffed spine, loose stitching, greased dark edges. I held it up and did my, "Okay, not what I expected" line, then decided to lean into the investigative angle. I put on nitrile gloves, partly for hygiene, partly because it signals to viewers you're not careless, and opened it. First pages. A table of contents in block caps, dates stacked by week. Then columns, address, names, time out, time back, route, notes. Thin strips of clear tape ran across some pages, pinning down glossy pharmacy prints. Photos of houses, driveways, bus stops, alleys. I chuckled into the mic and said it looked like somebody's weird urban field study. "Probably a PI thing," I said, half believing it. I flipped forward. The handwriting switched pens, blue ballpoint, then hard-pressed pencil, then ultrafine black. There were diagrams of parking lots with X's and arrows. Names had little tags. Dan, limps on stairs. Lena, frog lanyard. Kid, W, red backpack. The photos weren't artistic. They were functional. Heads down, doors half open, motion blur of a jogger crossing frame. I kept narrating because that's the job, but my mouth was on autopilot while my eyes started building a mental map. The dates lined up with recent seasons. Salt on sidewalks, then rain glare, then bright sun. This wasn't some relic. A folded map in the back pocket was ripped from an apartment guide. Someone had circled clusters of streets in thick pen. Those circles were on my side of town, which made my scalp feel tight. But cities overlap, so I told myself not to be dramatic. I marked a sticky note for later B-roll and kept going. Halfway in, the scope narrowed. Block-wide notes turned into building-specific notes. West stairwell latch sticks. Mail key on carabiner. Checks 1208-1212. Blind corner by trash enclosure. Photos got closer, taken low through fence slats or over hedges. Initials replaced first names and star symbols showed up next to lines that read like rehearsals. Tested, ERO1A0, no dog. Tested, ERO450, porch cam IR glare. I ran with the PI angle on camera. "Maybe a repo guy or process server," I said, because it sounded less crazy than the other option, the one I didn't want to say out loud. Then the sticky note. The paper had been pulled, leaving adhesive and a faint indentation that read, "Check Thurs 5:30, dog barks at hall cam." Who writes that unless they've stood there listening for it? I adjusted the top light, cleared my throat, and told the audience we were getting into the strange part, which wasn't a lie. I flipped another chunk of pages and froze because I recognized a wall mural in a photo. The cracked blue wave painted on the discount gym off Hollis. The margin read, "Hollis 8th, parked black Civic, W, faded sticker, back by 620. That's 2 blocks from me." I swallowed, kept filming, and steadied the notebook on the table so the camera could see exactly what I was seeing. My hands were steady. The heat climbing behind my ears wasn't. A torn corner tab stuck out near the bottom third. I thumbed to it. Across the top of the page, my street name was written in caps. First line, my building number. Second, my unit, hyphen and all, underlined. Below that, bullet points. Silver hatchback, V2, dent rear quarter, which is my car, and 2's Thurs, run 605, black shoes, counterclockwise loop. I held the page up to the lens and read the times I usually went for morning runs. The most shocking discovery was a photo of me working at my computer, clearly taken through my apartment window without my knowledge or permission. It wasn't a reflection or a screenshot of a stream or anything like that. It was my posture, my hoodie, the angle I lean when I'm color grading. and you could see the edge of the trackpad where I chipped it last winter. The shot was from slightly above eye level, which meant it wasn't some random street snap. Someone had to be close enough to my window to frame it like that. My voice cracked on camera, and I said I was going to blur it for upload, but I knew right then this video wasn't going up. I turned the page, and there were more photos. And I mean not artsy, just functional, shot through glass and shrub gaps, and the sliver where my blinds don't sit flush. And I started counting how many days in a row I had left the blinds tilted the same way, and I couldn't remember. The next pages contained surveillance photos of my parents at their suburban home where I grew up, plus pictures of my younger sister near her university campus across town. My mom hauling in groceries, my dad coiling a hose by the garage, my sister waiting at a crosswalk with earbuds in and a tote bag, and then there were columns of plate numbers with dates and times in the margins, like Mom CRV 742 back, Dad truck 2's off, S library 3rd floor, leaves 8:10. The logs included their daily schedules, work addresses, car license plate numbers, and detailed notes about their personal routines. Stuff I don't even know, like exactly when my dad pulls the bins to the curb, or when my sister hits the campus gym. My hands started shaking as I realized the scope of surveillance on my entire family, and I felt sick knowing someone had been watching us for weeks or months, because the dates stretched back far past the package ship date and overlapped with days I could account for. I hit the back pocket, and a loose print slid out. Yesterday's date, my post office where I'd picked up the package, wide shot of the entrance, my figure in the corner, and a note scrawled under it. Delivery completed successfully. Right then my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number saying, "Enjoying your gift?" along with a photo of me filming the unboxing at that exact moment. It was the same angle as my camera, but slightly higher, which meant it wasn't a screen grab, and I saw the exact frame of the notebook in my hands, so whoever took it had line of sight into my apartment. I didn't reply. I killed the camera, hit the light switches, yanked the plug on the key light because the switch sticks, and the room flattened into dark. I moved to the window but stayed off to the side and peeled a blind down with one finger, the way you do when you don't want movement to read from outside. Across the street, on the sidewalk in the shadow of a street tree, someone in dark clothing was standing still, shoulders angled toward my building. No phone out, no smoke, just there. I stepped back, locked the deadbolt, slid the chain, and dialed 911. I told the dispatcher I had an active stalking situation. The person might be watching my place right now, and I had documentation, like an entire notebook full. She asked for descriptions, if I felt in immediate danger, if the person had a weapon, which I couldn't see, and she said a patrol car was en route. While I waited, I texted my parents and sister the same message I've never had to write before. Do not go outside. Lock everything. Answer only for police. And then I called them one by one so I could hear their voices. There was a thump from the hallway that made me freeze. But it was my neighbor's door. And when I checked the street again, the person in dark clothing was gone. The space just empty, like they had stepped backward into the dark and dissolved. The patrol car rolled up 5 minutes later, 2 officers, and I waved them in with the notebook open on my table so there'd be no confusion about what I was saying. They cleared the stairwell, took a sweep outside, and one of them did a slow circle along the sidewalk where I'd seen the figure. Then we sat in my living room with the notebook between us. I showed them the photo of me at my desk, the family pages, the post office photo with yesterday's date, and the text message that had just come in. They took my phone to photograph the screen and wrote the number down. I asked what they could actually do right now. The older officer said, "We take a report, we flag the number, we request camera pulls from the postal facility, and we can ask for extra patrols, but without direct threats or trespass or an identified suspect, Our options are limited. I wasn't mad at them. That was just the situation. I deleted all the footage without posting the video. Not just for me, but because my family's faces were in that book, and I wasn't going to feed that into the internet. I packed a bag with my laptop and a couple days of clothes, and temporarily moved in with a friend while my family installed security systems and changed their routines. And I mean immediate changes. Motion lights, cameras covering the drive, new door hardware, different commute times, no repetitive patterns, and we made rules about posting nothing in real time. For the first week, I walked with someone to my car and back every time, and I varied my routes, and I kept the blinds shut no matter what. 4 months have passed without any new contact from the stalker, but I still check for surveillance whenever I go anywhere, and I don't run the same loop twice in a row. And if I see a lens, I move, and I'm done feeding views to anything that needs me to roll the dice with my actual life. I'm not ordering anything from anonymous sources again. Way back in 2016, when I was 16 and my brother Ben was 18, we decided to explore the dark web out of curiosity about hacker subculture. Our parents had gone away for the weekend, and the rainy evening was perfect for digital adventures. Ben claimed he knew how to safely access the hidden network, so we used an old computer in the basement, afraid of infecting our main devices. After installing Tor browser and setting up VPN, we started exploring anonymous forums. In one of the chats, someone sent us a link to exclusive content, without additional explanations. I warned Ben not to follow the suspicious link, but he ignored my concerns. He told me I was being paranoid, classic little brother stuff, and started talking about OPSEC like he was making a tutorial. The basement wasn't cozy or anything. It was a folding table with the old Dell tower, a square monitor, a wired mouse that stuck on the mat, and a cheap desk lamp we'd fixed with tape. The water heater clicked behind us. We put a strip of tape over the spare laptop's webcam out of habit, but we weren't even using that. The router sat on a shelf with the password on a sticky note. Yeah, real secure. The anonymous forum page looked like every other dead simple board, just text and links and way too many acronyms. Ben hovered the cursor over the exclusive link and I said, "Don't. Seriously. Dad's gonna kill us if we nuke the Wi-Fi." And he clicked anyway. The page half loaded and then stalled. The fan ramped up, and Ben muttered something about scripts and idiots trying to track clicks. He tried to back out. Task Manager wouldn't open. The cursor lagged, froze, jumped. "I'll shut it down clean," he said, already reaching toward the tower like he was doing me a favor. I told him to wait 2 seconds, and he pressed the power button. As soon as Ben clicked the link, the computer froze, and the screen went dark. The basement plunged into absolute darkness. The only sound was rain outside the window. We thought the link contained a virus that crashed the old machine. Ben tried to restart the system, but keyboard and mouse didn't respond. Deciding the computer was completely broken, we went upstairs to discuss how to explain the breakdown to our parents. After 10 minutes of hesitation, we returned to the basement to check the extent of damage. What we saw made us freeze in horror. The monitor had turned itself back on, even though the tower didn't make that usual single beep. The browser window filled the screen, but it wasn't the forum. The screen displayed a video call with an unknown user in a sinister skull mask. The stranger silently stared at the camera, slowly shaking his head. We thought it was a pre-recorded video until he raised his hand and pointed directly at Ben. When my brother stepped aside, the stranger's finger followed his movements. My heart was pounding from understanding that someone was watching us through the webcam in real time. Then the figure on screen turned to me and gestured to come closer. Ben quickly taped over the camera and yelled for me to turn off the computer, but the power button didn't work. I didn't even think. I just started pressing it. Tap, long hold, again. and the button clicked dead under my finger. Ben slapped the tape harder, like pressure would crush the lens into silence. "Kill the strip," I said, and he yanked the surge protector out of the wall. The lamp died, the tower fan spun down, and the basement went dead quiet except for the rain. The monitor stayed on. Pale glow. The skull filled more of the frame, like he'd leaned toward his camera. I said, "How is this even?" and stopped, because the cursor was moving on its own. It slid to a little camera icon and clicked. A tiny picture-in-picture popped in the top right, showing us in a frozen frame. Same angle, same lamp glow, which made no sense with the tape on. Ben ripped the Ethernet, then the HDMI, because doing anything felt better than staring. The feed didn't flicker. A chat panel opened along the left and lines started scrolling. Not a username we recognized, just strings and symbols, and then clean English. Our last name spelled right, then our street. I heard myself whisper, "No way," and he snapped, "Don't talk, mics." He pulled the router's power. The plastic brick went dark. The chat didn't stop. The skull mask tilted like it was listening and then steadied. I grabbed the side of the tower, swung it out, went for the cable bundle. The cursor drifted to the recycle bin and emptied it, like a kid knocking a cup off the counter to show he could. Ben stepped to the fuse box, flipped the basement breaker off and on. The house thunked somewhere distant. The monitor still glowed. The skull didn't blink. A new chat line. "Stay." Then, "Still." I said, "We're shutting it down and walking away." And even to me, it sounded like I was trying to convince us. The speakers crackled, and a low, flattened voice said, "Stay still." 2 words. No theatrics, no accent I could place. Ben breathed through his nose, sharp. "Voice changer," he said, like naming it helped. Then to me, "Drive out now." He slid the tower toward himself, fingers under the K-slip. On screen, the skull lifted one finger and wagged it slow, side to side. I yanked open the desk drawer to grab a Phillips and knocked over a stack of old CD cases. They clattered. The picture-in-picture twitched like it was tracking the sound. "Don't come closer," Ben said to me, then raised his voice at the screen. "We're done." He tore another strip of tape and wrapped it over the camera again, then around the bezel like he could mummify the monitor. The tape bunched around his fingers. The cursor slid to a gear icon and opened a camera settings pane, just to show it could. "We should go upstairs," I said. "Landline, police." He shook his head. "If he's in the network, he's listening. We leave this running, he's still here." It wasn't panic, it was triage. He popped the side panel off the tower and reached for the PSU cable. The chat started typing again. This time it wasn't names, it was numbers, 4 by 4, then the last 4 of Dad's phone, then my school login. I didn't ask how it got that. The voice said, "Stay still," same tone, same cadence, and it felt heavier anyway. Ben squeezed my wrist like an anchor, then leaned in again. On the screen, the finger tracked his movement exactly, like it could see through the tape and the angle of his hand. Upstairs, something creaked. Normal house noise. But it got slotted into the same fear like it belonged to him. "Main breaker," Ben said, half to me. I shook my head. If the strip didn't kill it, I didn't finish. He took a breath and barked, "Turn it off," like shouting at a stubborn appliance, and I pressed the button, held, pressed again, and kept holding as if force would change anything. Ben quickly taped over the camera and yelled for me to turn off the computer, but the power button didn't work. I pulled the power cable from the wall, and the screen finally went dark. We waited a full minute to make sure nothing blinked back on, then went upstairs without touching anything else because anything felt like a trigger. In the living room, we killed the lights and sat with our backs to the couch so we could see the front door and the hallway at the same time. Ben kept saying, "Okay, okay," under his breath like it was a button he could press. It was obvious someone had gained remote access and was using our webcam for surveillance. No mystery there, just us being dumb and someone capable taking advantage. I said, "No internet tonight, no exceptions," and he nodded hard. We took our phones off Wi-Fi and set them face down. Not that it mattered, but it made the room feel contained. We didn't go near the windows. We spent the rest of the night in the living room, checking locks and avoiding glass. Every half hour one of us did a loop. Front deadbolt, back latch, slider bar, the garage door from the kitchen, touch, twist, done, then back to the couch. We peeked from the side of the curtains because Ben kept saying, "Angles matter," and I didn't want to argue about anything. I taped over every spare webcam in the house, even the broken one on the old laptop, and he shut off the router and pulled the coax from the wall so nothing could phone home by accident. We wrote a list on a crumpled receipt. Wipe the drive, change passwords off-site, new email, two-factor everywhere, no more Tor in our house. Ever. We didn't call anyone. We didn't want a record of any of it. The rain finally slowed after midnight and the house noises got louder, which made everything worse. Next day the computer worked normally, but we never connected it to the network again. Around 9 in the morning we went downstairs together. The surge strip was still out of the wall, and the tower panel sat open where Ben had left it. He plugged only the power into the wall, no Ethernet, and hit the button. The old machine booted slow like always. BIOS splash, one beep, then the same bland wallpaper we'd had since middle school. No pop-ups, no chat pane, no cursor sliding on its own. We checked startup items and device manager even though it didn't feel like they'd tell us anything. Ben said, "Ethernet stays out forever." And I agreed. We taped over the webcam again, tighter, and pulled the mic cable. He wanted to wipe the drive right then, but we decided to leave it unplugged and dead until we could figure out a clean way to destroy it without questions. We closed the panel and didn't look at the screen again. A week later, our neighbor mentioned seeing a suspicious person lurking near our house the night after the incident. Mr. Patel stopped me by the trash cans and asked if everything was okay. I said, "Yeah, just tired." And he said he didn't want to scare me but thought we should know. He'd seen a young guy in dark clothes with a backpack by our side yard around 11:30, crouched near the basement windows like he was trying to get a good angle. He was photographing, he said, tapping his phone and making that little rectangle with his hands. When he called out, "Hey, what are you doing?" The guy turned his face away and walked off fast toward the street, not running but purposeful, cutting toward the alley. "College age," Mr. Patel said. He looked at me like he expected me to do something right there. I told him thanks for telling us, and that I'd let my dad know. I didn't mention anything else. We never learned if that visit was connected to our dark web exploration or just coincidence. Ben and I walked the side yard and checked the window wells anyway. There were faint smudges on the exterior glass that could have been anything. We went inside and checked the locks again even though we had just checked them. We talked about calling the police, and then didn't. We were afraid to admit our digital experiments, afraid of having to hand over devices and explain Tor and VPNs and clicking a random link, and we really didn't want our stuff imaged and our names in some report. Instead, we swapped out our router, changed the Wi-Fi name and password, added motion lights by the side yard, and kept that old desktop offline for good. Ben said, "We got lucky." Like that counted as a strategy. We didn't tell our parents anything true. We just said the basement power had flickered, and we moved the desk for space. To this day, when footsteps crunch outside the window at night, or a car idles too long near our curb, I see that skull on a screen that should have been off, And I picture a phone hovering over our basement window. And I wonder how many people get watched through the cameras on their devices without ever knowing. And how often that kind of quiet watching crosses out of a browser and into real life. During my sophomore year studying cybersecurity, I discovered something horrifying that changed my perspective on everything I thought I knew about online safety. It started as this dumb flex thing some of us did after labs, like a half-joke competition. Who could dig up the most insane stuff hiding behind onion links and invite-only boards? At first, it was all edgy but typical. Markets with sketchy pills, dump sites full of cracked software, forum posts trading cryptors that half the time were malware themselves. I told myself it was research, that knowing the landscape made me better at defense. That's what our professor always said. Understand the adversary. But then people got competitive and weirdly proud about it. The search escalated fast. Breach dumps, ransomware builder kits, low-effort docs packs shared like baseball cards. When one guy pulled up a forum where they were trading personal info of minors, like with disgustingly casual bundles, the room went quiet for a second, and I waited for somebody to shut it down. But then someone laughed and a couple others called it a sick find. I felt my face burn and my stomach twist, and I should have said something right then. But I just stared at my keyboard and swallowed it because I wasn't ready to pick a fight with half my cohort in a crowded lab. It only got worse after that. Not like a huge dramatic turn, but this steady drip. Little comments that landed heavier every week. The others noticed I never brought anything good to the table, so they started calling me Scout. Like I was the kid who carries the flashlight but never goes in the cave. Haha, funny at first, but then it stuck. You get it. Inside joke turned label turned status. They'd corner me after class with, "Yo, Scout, check this," and shove their screens in my face. Snuff-adjacent threads, panels selling access to hacked cams, proof-of-life photos from some kidnapping rumor that I pray to God was just a scam. I'd flinch or say, "Dude, enough," and they'd say stuff like, "We're toughening you up," or, "If you're gonna do IR, you can't be squeamish." And I knew they were half justifying their own curiosity. But it worked because I started feeling like I didn't belong. They made it sound like gatekeeping. If you can't stomach looking at it, how are you supposed to stop it? I told myself I had thick skin and that I just needed a win. One undeniable find so they'd get off my back, and I could go back to actually studying instead of auditioning for people who slept 4 hours and lived on caffeine and bravado. Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to understand it wasn't like I woke up craving human misery. I just got tired of the nickname and the smirks when I passed on their Telegram group. I had projects due. I had a part-time help desk gig, and I didn't want the extra noise. But being on the outside of your own study group makes everything harder. Notes, study sessions, who shares practice exams, who pulls you into Git repos. So one night after a NetSec meetup, I told myself, fine, I'll go deep, and I'll find something that makes them shut up, not gore, not that stuff. Just something technically impressive. It wasn't bravado, it was triage. I figured I'd stick to threat actor chatter and tooling, grab screenshots, redact names, call it a day. Reasonable, right? I set up in my dorm with the crappy desk lamp and a fresh VM, 2 VPN hops, tore through a hardened browser profile, the boring hygiene steps we all swear by but cut corners on when we're tired. I avoided opening anything that wanted extra permissions, no media autoplay, scripts mostly disabled, the whole thing. For hours it was the usual slog, dead mirrors, invite gates, paywalls where the wallet links 404'd, threads arguing about OPSEC like it was sports talk radio. I found a thread on a private board that looked promising, an index claiming to organize infrastructure docs for a mid-tier crew. The post read technical, not sensational, and it linked to a paste that looked like mundane documentation. It even had revision notes, which is such a nerd tell that I let my guard down for half a second. I clicked, and my webcam light blinked on. I froze. It was that 1-second lag where your brain is doing the math, no camera app open, nothing should be touching that device. And yet there it was, the stupid green LED cutting through my reflection on the dorm window. Instinct kicked in, and I killed the browser, killed the VM, yanked the USB cover over the camera, and shut the lid. And for a beat, I just sat there listening for anything. Fan noise, drive noise. Like any of that would tell me what just happened. I told myself it was a permissions race or some weird driver quirk. I'd seen stranger. But the LED had lit, and that wasn't just a quirk. I should have torn it all down right there, rebuilt the image, reflashed firmware if I had to. But it was after 3 a.m., my eyes were sandpaper, and I had 2 programming classes in the morning with a lab quiz that I couldn't blow. I wiped the desk, checked the door lock twice, and crashed with my hoodie over my face like a curtain, because the tape over the camera felt suddenly too thin. The next day flowed like nothing happened. That's the messed up part. Routine can hide a lot. I grabbed a protein bar, skimmed my notes on linked lists, took the quiz, answered a couple Slack pings about a group project, and by the afternoon I'd convinced myself I'd clicked a harmless link with a nasty script that fired but didn't stick. I ran a quick sweep between classes on the VM. Nothing obvious popped, which didn't prove anything, but my brain gratefully took it as proof. I kept my laptop closed unless I needed it, and when I did, the tape stayed on. I didn't mention it to anyone because what would I say? Hey guys, I clicked a dumb thing while trying to impress you? Yeah, not happening. 2 days later, same rhythm. Lecture, lab, coffee, pretend I'm fine. At night, I got a DM from one of the guys with a sarcastic, "You alive, Scout?" which I ignored because I didn't owe him anything, and I went back to my scripts. Nothing felt off in my room, no moved mouse, no weird logins on my accounts, so the fear slid into the background like static you stop hearing. Then the morning hit where everything snapped back into focus. I walked into systems at 9:58, still zipping my hoodie, and the usual pre-class noise wasn't there. No loud bragging, no half-jokes about C-pointers. The entire study group was jammed around one laptop near the middle aisle, bodies tight, heads dipped, whispering in this frantic way that doesn't sound like gossip, it sounds like triage. I slowed without meaning to, 1 foot on the concrete step, and the first thing I saw was how white everyone looked. People who usually strutted now hunched and shaking, a couple of the guys actually backing away like the screen was heat. 2 of the girls had their hands over their mouths. "What is this?" someone said. Not to me, just to the air. And one of the girls, the one who always rolled her eyes at me, was crying hard enough that her shoulders jumped. I stepped closer, and as I got near, I realized my entire study group was pale and sweaty, and whispering like they were afraid someone might hear them, which was completely unlike their usual confident attitudes. Nobody noticed me at first, not really, but when the lecture started, I could feel eyes on me from 3 rows up and 2 rows back, staring like I'd done something unspeakable, and I kept pretending to type notes that were just the same line over and over because my hands were shaking in this small, dumb way that irritated me. Every time the professor turned to the board, I caught another face, that pinched look like they'd bitten into a battery, and it wasn't the usual scout smirk, it was fear, and I kept my head down and watched the clock. As soon as he said, "That's all for today," I stood, zipped my bag, and headed for the aisle. But one of the guys, the one with the loud laugh, stepped into my path and grabbed my arm with both hands, sweaty and hard enough to hurt. He said, "We need to talk, dude, now." And his voice cracked in a way I'd never heard, so I went. He led me to an empty classroom down the hall, door already propped open with a trash can, and inside the rest of them were scattered in those tablet chairs, not talking, just staring at one laptop with the brightness turned too low, like they were afraid of light. Nobody said scout. Nobody said anything for a second. Then the quiet girl who never swore said, "You have to see this." And she pulled up a page that was a screenshot of a forum thread, username redacted with a sloppy black box, timestamp from last night, title in that smug half-English style, complete PKG, college mail, verified cam. My name was in the body, my home address, the dorm room, my class schedule down to the room numbers and times. There were photos, me at my desk, me sleeping with the hoodie over my face, me brushing my teeth in the mirror with the door half open, which meant the webcam wasn't the only thing because some were from the hallway, or from across the quad, or pulled from somewhere I'd posted and forgotten about. Someone had organized it like a product page, like a menu, with a price in crypto and buyer escrow accepted, and a note that said, "Live feed possible, message first." I said, "Where did you get this?" And the loud laugh guy said, "Same boards we've been scraping." And the quiet girl said, "We weren't looking for you, we swear." And someone else added, "It was pinned, like top-rated, like they're pushing it." And I heard my own voice ask if they'd clicked anything. They shook their heads fast. And then I told them to scroll, and they did. And at the bottom, there was a tiny thread of comments where some idiot asked for proof, and the poster replied with a still of my room from the angle of my webcam with the light off. So yeah, they'd bypassed the indicator, or they'd grabbed frames earlier, which explained the blink, which meant I'd been compromised for at least long enough to produce evidence. I reached for the laptop and then stopped because I didn't want to touch anything they'd touched, and I sat down instead and told them exactly what to do and what not to do, like a checklist, because a checklist is something you can hold. We moved fast. I told them no one clicks, no one messages, no one tries to negotiate. We took photos of the screen with my phone in airplane mode for later, because screenshots can leak, and then I powered my phone off anyway. We walked as a group to the lab where the department kept the incident line posted on the wall, and we called campus police and the IT security office. Both, because one would say call the other otherwise. And I said the words, active docs for sale, and possible unauthorized access. And the guy on the phone stopped sounding bored. We gave statements. I handed over the VM image and my laptop after I backed nothing up. They said they'd do chain of custody, and I made them write the serial number in front of me. Someone from housing met me with a new key card and a new room assignment for the weekend, while they inspected mine. Reasonable, fine. And the dean of students asked if I had anyone to stay with, and I said no. I'd take the new room, and one of the girls said quietly, "Do you want someone to sit outside your door?" And I said, "Not outside, just text." Because at that point, I wanted fewer people near anything related to me, even if they meant well. They were all different in that room. No jokes, no memes, no man-up stuff, just this brittle focus. We set up two-factor on anything I'd missed, rotated passwords with a long random generator on a clean machine, pulled recovery emails off old accounts, locked down my social profiles, nuked a couple of dumb posts from high school that had full names and dates, stupid, but normal stupid, and then we filed an abuse report through the only channel that existed for that forum, which would probably go nowhere, but it sat on the list with everything else. The loud laugh guy kept apologizing without using the word sorry, just fragments like "we didn't" and "we thought," and I cut him off because we had a sequence and we were sticking to it. The quiet girl printed the screenshots for the police, which felt archaic, but that's what they'd asked for. When the admin from IT Sec finally looked me in the eye, he said, "This is credible." And it landed like a verdict. Later that day, when the mess hit the group chat, it shifted the whole orbit. They shut down their hunting sessions. The Telegram channels went silent, or people left. Someone tried to spin it as a lesson and got roasted by the same people who used to clap for the worst links. Practical tasks replaced the thrill-seeking. Secure your routers, audit your devices, stop bragging about breach dumps you barely understand. I didn't become their friend. That wasn't the point. They were scared in a way that made them useful. I still don't know who listed me or how many copies are floating around, and maybe that's the part that keeps me moving, because you can't wait for closure when the whole thing lives on strangers' hard drives and in caches you can't reach. What I do know is that one lazy click to impress people who never had my back turned my life into a checklist I work every day. Locks, updates, reports, backups. And even if the page disappears tomorrow, the proof that it was ever up is enough to change how I handle every research impulse. Because the line between learning and enabling is thinner than we want to admit, and I'm not ever going to be the one pretending it isn't there again. In late 2019, when I first rented an apartment in Seattle and started living independently, curiosity led me to hidden corners of the internet. I was spending evenings after work clicking through threads that felt half academic, half scurrilous, and I told myself I was just learning. Network security basics, exploits I'd never try, that kind of thing. Because if you understand how people break things, you understand how to protect them. That was my justification anyway. The apartment was small but mine, a one-bedroom with a thrifted desk by the window, and it felt weirdly empowering opening Tor for the first time, like I was stepping backstage where all the wires show, even though I was basically just reading forum posts and taking notes. Over a few weeks, I found a lane that wasn't just 0 days and ransomware bravado, underground gaming threads where hobbyist devs swapped demos and odd experiments. I liked those because the stakes seemed lower and the people sounded more like me, tired coders chasing novelty. On one board, a user calling himself Digital Architect was everywhere. Long posts about procedural narrative, reinforcement learning models, privacy as a game mechanic. Sounded smart, but also like someone trying a little too hard to look smart. He DM'd me after I asked a question in a thread and said, "You want to test a private build? It's a revolutionary AR game." I replied that I only had a laptop, no headset, and he said the AR part was simulated for now and would use your context. He talked like a startup pitch deck. The hook was that the game mined open data to build a personalized world. I said that sounded sketchy. He said, "Open as in public. It's a proof of concept. I need honest feedback." Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to understand I wasn't completely reckless. I spun up a Linux VM, fresh user, no personal accounts, Wi-Fi through a spare router with a basic firewall profile I tweaked myself, and I told myself I'd kill the whole environment if anything looked off. He sent a link over an onion address and a GPG signed checksum. There was a README that looked professional, a minimal launcher, no permissions prompts outside the VM, nothing screaming obvious malware. I still hesitated because I'd read enough freegame.exe stole my life posts to know how dumb that could be. But curiosity, man. I figured 10 minutes, tops. The game booted with that crunchy early 2000s vibe, flat textures, jittery shadows, stiff camera. My avatar popped into a rectangular room, and my first thought was, that looks a lot like my place. I nudged the character around and my stomach did this small drop because it wasn't just the couch and the desk. It was the IKEA lamp with the crooked shade, the chipped mug by the sink, the exact pattern of my cheap bookshelf. Same titles. Even the dumb programming interview prep book I never finished. I kept telling myself it was a trick of generic assets until I zoomed into the kitchen and saw the hairline crack on the handle of my favorite mug and the little black spot where I burned a pan last month. That's when I paused the game and sat back like, okay, how? I started listing possibilities. My old social posts, a landlord's virtual tour video, XIF data, Even that time my friend tagged me in a story at my place. The Redmi said it used ambiently available signals, which could mean anything. While I was spiraling through that, a second character spawned near the hallway. Tall, masked, all black, no textures except these blank white ovals where eyes should have been, and it immediately sprinted toward my avatar. I jerked the keyboard and ran through the virtual bedroom, slammed the door, the game let you do that, and the figure began pounding on it with this canned thud 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 that shook the whole scene. A chat window popped in the corner. You found your safe room. Then another line. But you forgot the balcony lock. I stopped breathing for a second because my real bedroom had the dumbest sliding door latch and I'd been meaning to replace it. And in the game, the balcony door was cracked open a pixel, and the masked thing started moving around the other way. I alt-tabbed to the VM monitor to try to kill the process, but the cursor lagged and the audio glitched, just looping that pounding and a low synthetic hum. The figure came in through the virtual balcony, and I had this stupid impulse to shout out loud even though it was 1 a.m., and no one would hear me. I tried ESC, tried the launcher's overlay, finally mashed the power state on the VM, and it hung for a beat. Then the whole thing crashed to a generic error. The incident had lasted maybe 10 minutes. I shut the laptop, unplugged the spare router, and walked the apartment once turning deadbolts I knew were already turned, because it felt like the only action that made sense. The next morning, I deleted the game files, wiped the VM image, uninstalled Tor, like an overreaction maybe, but it felt clean. I told myself it was a dumb stunt, a clever scrape of my public footprint fed into a level generator and wrapped in an edgy chase scene. I decided I was done with questionable software, as my mom would call it, and I actually meant it, which might be the only smart decision in this whole thing. I went back to normal life for a couple days, work, gym, cheap noodles, podcasts. I slept fine the first night, not great the second. On the third night, well, technically morning, at around 3, my phone vibrated hard enough on the nightstand to skitter into the charging cable. It was that aggressive buzz my home security app uses for motion alerts. I'd installed a video doorbell when I moved in because the building's lobby lock was flimsy and the camera had only ever caught delivery guys and the neighbor's cat. It wandered the hall like it paid rent. I squinted at the screen and saw motion detected, front door. A timestamp. 3:02 a.m. I lay there for maybe 2 seconds thinking maybe it was a moth or a glitch, because those happen and sleep feels important when you're trying to not be paranoid. But then there was a second buzz, back-to-back notifications like someone was still there. I sat up, heart pounding, but in that focused way where your body is doing the math for you. I had a basic plan I'd thought about. Don't open the door. Don't talk through it. Call 911 if anything escalates. And I reached for the nightstand drawer where I kept a small can of pepper gel because I'm not a hero, and I wasn't going out there to square up with whoever. The apartment was quiet. That dead carpet quiet you get in old buildings. I looked at the actual door from the bed, and the bottom light gap showed nothing moving. I listened another beat for footsteps or voices and heard none. The third buzz came in. Motion detected. And that settled it. I needed eyes on it because my brain was already filling in blanks with worst-case stuff, like someone casing the locks or trying handles up and down the hall. I slid my feet into sneakers instead of going barefoot. Habit. Better traction. Fewer stupid injuries if you have to move fast. Grabbed my phone and turned off the interior light in the bedroom so I wouldn't silhouette myself in the doorway. I crossed to the hallway, staying to the wall because the peephole angle in my building is weird, and paused by the corner. I kept one hand on the pepper gel and told myself to keep breathing steady and not do anything dumb like fling the door open just to get it over with, because that's not problem solving, that's panic. I glanced at the deadbolt, engaged, chain on, and stepped back enough that whoever was outside couldn't hear me through the wood if they were pressed against it. Then I unlocked my phone, thumb lagging from sweat, tapped the notification stack, and opened the video doorbell app with a sinking heart. On the recording was a person in dark clothes and mask, exactly like the character from the game. The stranger stood before the camera for about a minute, then slowly waved and disappeared into darkness. I replayed it twice, pausing for anything useful, a reflection, a logo, a ring, nothing but that lazy two-finger wave and the way they held center like they knew the motion box. I saved the clip and stared at the empty live view for a long minute. I didn't sleep after that. I walked the apartment with the pepper gel in my pocket, checked the balcony latch, dropped a broom handle in the track, and set a chair under the bedroom knob because it felt like doing something. When the sun came up, I backed up the video to 3 places and pulled stills. I texted the property manager about lobby and stair cams and knocked on the 2 closest doors. Across the hall, my neighbor said she hadn't heard anything. When I showed the still, she said she'd start using the deadbolt every time. I walked the stairwell 2 floors down looking for a propped door, found none, came back and wrote down the times. Then I took a bus to the precinct with a USB drive. The desk officer took the report while another looked over the still. Mask, hoodie, gloves, he said. Did they try the handle? No. Any verbal? No. Any damage? No. Okay, that's suspicious activity. We'll log it. If they come back and test the lock, call 911. He handed me a case number and the non-emergency line. Could be a prankster or someone struggling, he added. Don't engage. I said I wouldn't. Back at the building, the manager had the DVR open. We scrubbed 245 to 315 on lobby, elevator, and stairs. No masked person, no hoodie, just a delivery at 249 and empty halls. Maybe they came earlier and waited, she said. We checked the parking gate. Nothing. The stairwell on my floor only showed the motion light flicking with no body in frame. Angles are bad, she said, and printed a note reminding everyone to secure entries. I spent the afternoon on practical changes. I ordered a reinforcement plate and a wedge alarm, moved my desk so I could see the entry from the bedroom, and put a screwdriver and the pepper gel on the nightstand. I set the camera to push alerts for any motion at any hour. I texted 2 friends the clip with, "Check in on me this week," and we agreed on a 1 emoji code that meant call 911 first, me second. At dusk, the officer called to confirm the report and repeated the line about a prank or a person in crisis. I said I'd document everything and not open the door to anyone at night. Then I turned the hallway light on and waited for nothing to happen. I didn't mention the connection to the dark web game. Understanding it sounded paranoid. However, the costume coincidence was too precise for chance, and the part that sticks with me is how the game knew my layout, and then a person wearing that same blank face stood where I live. Since then, I avoid anonymous networks and suspicious software, but the habit stuck. I review the camera queue every morning, I double-check the latch, I keep the wedge alarm by the door when I sleep. I never learned who Digital Architect was, or how he obtained information about my apartment, and I stopped trying to trace his handle after realizing any message I sent would just tell him I was still paying attention. Maybe it was a social experiment by a hacker measuring the psychological impact of being watched. Maybe it was someone local using the game as a pretext to study potential victims and see who reacted, who called police, who didn't. The worst part is understanding how fast a virtual threat can step into the hallway outside your door and make you change how you live, and how thin the distance is between digital anonymity and personal safety. When a stranger in a mask knows exactly where to wave every single time now. Honestly. I work for a private cybersecurity firm that contracts with law enforcement to track down dangerous online content, and 3 years ago, I discovered a network of 5 connected sites hosting live violent streams. I didn't stumble onto it by accident or with some magic browser like people on YouTube claim. I was on a long-term case, chasing overlaps between a ransomware crew and a trafficking forum. And in a small side chat, a user with mod-level swagger dropped a hint about shows that weren't on any Onion index. Most pros will tell you this stuff is made up, and most of it is. But the real ones don't look like creepypasta. They look like a logistics problem. Vetted entry points, staged authentication, and access handed out in little traceable packets to people who already have dirt on their hands. The chatter said administrators wanted proof of serious intent, not fandom. I started a SOC persona that fit their mold. Low-key, fluent in their tools, good at shutting up. And I kept it boring on purpose. Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to understand how long this took. 'Cause people think you just click a thing and you're in. Months. I spent them in dead voice channels, swapping disposable wallets with tiny test sends, and answering those weird gatekeeping questions criminals love. Hashing odd strings, verifying PGP fingerprints that were intentionally 1 bit off to see if you'd notice, and doing that dance where you don't sound eager, but you also don't spook them. The admin I finally connected with called himself Supervisory 1. He typed like a guy who managed people in the real world, short, direct, no emojis. And he pushed me through a staggered ladder they called levels, 5 of them, each with its own landing page and its own rules posted like workplace signage. The first 2 were cheap to reach. Think a few hundred in crypto when fees were low. But you couldn't get to level 2 without leaving a breadcrumb they could use to weigh your value. The final levels asked for more, not just coins. They wanted referrals and proof you'd participated, which is a word that still makes my stomach flip. I built trust the only way you can in those spaces. I solved little problems on command. Mirror this link without hitting detection. Re-encode that clip so the hash doesn't match law enforcement libraries. It was all stuff that a bored grad student could do, which is part of why this industry exists. There's always someone who can turn a wrench. Eventually, Supervisor 1 said I'd cleared their observation tier. He sent an access code, 6 characters, plus a numeric identifier that he said tied to my risk profile. He warned me chats were logged, viewers were ranked, and anyone who typed like a LEO got booted and doxxed. His words. I told my contact in the task force that I had a window. The answer was the same as always. Document, don't interact, don't ping the hive. Using the code, I went in. It was easier than I expected, which always worries me. But the prep made it feel like walking into an office where you've already had your badge printed. The landing page was bare bones, just a slate background, a menu of streams labeled with soft titles like Visiting Sarah and Surprise for Jessica, and a text strip with numbers that looked like viewer counts and latency. No chat box at that level, no emojis, nothing that felt like YouTube. Just a quiet directory that already had the smell of a calendar. I clicked Visiting Sarah because it was at the top and the timer showed it was live. The feed opened on a shaky mobile camera aimed down a hallway. You could see a living room ahead. Big TV, low white couch, a glass coffee table with magazines, and a wall lined with family photos, the kind you get done at a mall studio. The camera operator was breathing through his nose, close to the mic, whispering in Spanish, too soft to catch everything. But I caught "Ya viene," which meant someone was coming. The camera slid back behind a half-open door, and the frame narrowed to that strip of white carpet and the entryway. A woman in blue medical scrubs keyed in and stepped inside, holding a gym bag. She looked tired in that normal end-of-shift way, like she planned to drop the bag and wash her hands. From the left edge of the frame, a man in a black hoodie and mask surged and swung, metal in his hand, like a tire iron or pry bar. It made that dull, hard sound, and he hit her again, then again. She folded hard, straight down, and there was blood on the white carpet that brightened fast. I remember thinking the carpet choice told me more about the house than any OSINT. Someone liked things spotless, things that showed dirt. He shouted something toward the lens, short, clipped Spanish, an instruction, and the camera tilted so fast it blurred. Both feeds went dark at the same second, like someone killed power at a switch. I stared at the blank screen. Staged? I'd seen staged. Staged uses edits and angle changes and props, and this didn't. But my job wasn't to decide, it was to capture. So I grabbed the timestamps, the headers, the element IDs, all the stuff a DA would want to see later, and I went back to the directory. I clicked, "Surprise for Jessica." The thumbnail was a green park sign and a path. The feed came up on a woman jogging in a red tracksuit, ponytail bouncing, earbuds in. The camera wasn't handheld this time. It was on the dash of a car or wedged into a vent. The lower right corner of the frame showed a sliver of a damaged bumper, scraped plastic. You could see the black underlayer, so I knew I wasn't imagining the angle. The operator was talking to whoever was in the car with him, or to the audience. Same Spanish as before, light and mean, laughing at her pace, saying she was ciega, 'cause she never looked back. The car followed at a lazy speed that only looks normal if you've never had a tail. I felt stupid because I had that instinct to help, like take a snapshot of the intersection sign and call it in. But it wasn't live, not in any way I could affect. And even if it had been, the delay and the lack of verifiable location make those calls worse than useless. They tip off the wrong people. So I logged details. The park benches were the bolted steel kind. The lamps were the tall municipal ones with square heads, and the athletic field fence on the right had a torn section wired with a coat hanger. Little things you can match later. The feed cut out, just black with a small buffering icon, and there was no error message on the page. I thought it was done. I shifted to grab the stream info, and then it clicked back on. The picture was suddenly high contrast, grainy and green. Night vision. Same vehicle, different place. The path was gone. Trees rose up in tight rows, trunks pale and vertical, with no underbrush like a manicured forest edge. The audio was dead except for a faint hum, probably the car idling. The camera panned left slow, like someone turning the wheel slightly to frame a clearing, and the green washed over everything, showing a greenish forest setting with tall trees surrounding the scene. The lens drifted and settled, and in the green center of the frame she was there, the same red tracksuit from the jog, only the jacket was bunched and her hair was matted, and she was in a trunk with the carpet liner ripped up under her, wrists bound with wide tape, ankles crossed and cinched, gag pressed in so hard her cheeks bulged. The camera moved in and caught her eyes blown wide, tracking the person behind the lens. A man leaned over her, dark mask, cheap kind you can get in bulk, and his voice switched to English like he'd rehearsed it, soft like he was talking down a skittish dog, telling her she was okay and this is gonna be quick, while stroking her hair. And she tried to twist away, but the tape creaked, and she made this sound in her throat that didn't carry on the mic 'cause of the gag. He slid his hands under her shoulders and pulled, and her head clipped the trunk lid, metal on bone, a clean ringing sound. And he winced and said, sorry, like that mattered. And for half a second I thought maybe this was some sick LARP, like they'd stop and ask for tips. He didn't stop. Another set of hands reached in from the right, bigger, and they hauled her out, dead weight, feet dragging on the dirt. The night vision flared and the trees strobed by as the camera followed. They walked her to the back of the same car with the scraped bumper. The operator set the phone so it framed the rear end straight on, and then the hands came back into view with a coil of rope that had grease marks on it. Old tow line by the look. And they worked with fast motions that meant they'd done this before, wrapping her ankles, looping under the tow hook, knotting twice, yanking hard and testing it like they were checking a load. She was shaking head to side like no, 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 and trying to sit up, but the tape on her wrists pinned to her lower back, and she couldn't get leverage. The masked man said, "Breathe," again in that syrupy tone, which is when my brain, idiot that it is, blurted that maybe this was staged. Maybe they were going to cut and paste a jump scare or some fake out. Anything except what the setup said. He got in the driver's seat. The brake lights pulsed on and off as his foot tested the pedal. The engine vibrated the frame, and the tailpipe shimmered heat into the night vision and turned bright white. From the left, the other man crouched and tightened the knot again, fingers quick. Then he slapped the trunk twice like a ready signal. The woman's eyes met the lens dead center, and she held that stare like she was trying to lock onto a person in the dark, and I realized I was leaning into my monitor like I could close distance, like proximity equals intervention. It doesn't. The camera's mic picked up the starter whine, then the engine caught and settled into a low idle. The man in the mask put the car into gear. My ears know that clunk. And the feed glitched, went macro block, recovered, and then the progress bar at the bottom jumped and froze. The transmission ended right there, and the page kicked me back to the directory like nothing had happened. I sat still because movement felt like it would make me miss a breadcrumb. I dumped the cache, preserved the stream manifest, snagged the M3U8 and the media chunks that had actually saved locally, checked the clock, checked the wallet ledger for the viewer ping times, all the rote steps that keep your hands going when your head is static. I escalated to my contact with the clip and the hashes and the probable language ID. He said what they always say. "We've logged it. Don't re-enter the room. Don't tip." I didn't. I kept watching the list titles die out one by one as if they were time boxes closing. Now, before anyone says I'm making myself the hero, I need to explain why I don't call myself that. Why I even hesitate to post this. Back in school, when I was first poking around hidden sections, not out of some dark kink, at least that's what I told myself, but because I was writing a paper on darknet markets, I spent a lot of nights clicking through vendor tables and reading those stupid trust posts about shipping times for pills and powders and forged IDs, and that's how I learned to juggle wallets and mixers and not get scammed. It felt like beating a game, and when you're 20 and broke, that feeling messes with you. One night I followed a link chain out of a market forum into a place that didn't sell anything. It organized bets, not sports, not races, people. Real people. The threads were heads-up contests with names and cities and profiles scraped from social, and the bet wasn't whether they'd win a match. It was whether they'd kill themselves. When and how and what final straw would be. Participation required swapping regular crypto into these dumb death tokens, which had their own blind swap rules, and it was a whole learning curve that I took as a challenge. It took me a week, and when it cleared, I felt that hit like I joined some elite club. I chose a target because that's what you do in those rooms if you want status. A student at a nearby university, Jennifer, same city, a face I'd seen tag flooded with party pics. I took the standard line that the forum pushed. Incremental pressure wins. So I posted little rumors from burner accounts, nudged fights between her and friends, pushed DMs that said things like, "We all know." Garbage like that. The stuff that can pile up if nobody cuts it off. I put tokens on a 1-year horizon, said she'd break before finals. She didn't. She got a therapist. Her friends did that campus check-in thing. She survived. I lost the bet, and I should have just left it there. But the forum doesn't forget you even if you think you're invisible. Every so often, even now, I get a ping in a fresh inbox with an old handle of mine or a hash of an email address I've never used publicly. Just a little wave from that hole to remind me they can still see. And when I watched that green-lit road behind the car and those eyes, I knew the line between observing and participating wasn't a line for me back then. It was a slope. And all this documentation never made me clean. It just made me careful.